I need the money by tomorrow morning. My daughter Jasmine barked at me, shoving a crumpled stack of overdue notices into my chest. No excuses, no delays. Her husband Blake snapped from the corner of the room, looking at his watch as if my life savings were just a transaction he was waiting to process. I just smiled and said, "Okay." 4 hours later, I was already at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport sipping a glass of bourbon while waiting for a one-way flight to Paris, when they stormed into my house the next day demanding the cash. All they found was a locked door and a small cardboard box on the kitchen table. The moment they opened it, they started screaming, but they did not know that the scream was just the beginning of their nightmare. My name is Morgan Mitchell. I am 68 years old, and for 40 years I worked as a lead engineer in Detroit, designing heavy-duty braking systems for trucks that move this country. I am a man of metal precision, and silence. Retirement was supposed to be my victory lap, a quiet life in Atlanta with my garden and my memories of my late wife Coretta. But as it turns out, peace is a luxury when you have raised a daughter who thinks love is a currency and a son-in-law who thinks dignity is for sale. Before I continue this story, let me know which city you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. The evening started like any other Sunday dinner. I had spent the afternoon slow, cooking a pot roast, just the way Coretta used to make it. The house smelled of rosemary and thyme, a scent that usually brought me comfort. But the moment Jasmine and Blake walked through the door, the air turned heavy. Jasmine did not even say hello. She marched straight to the dining table, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. Blake followed her, looking disheveled, his usually slicked-back hair messy, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat without a word. Jasmine threw the papers onto the table right on top of the placemat where I usually set Coretta's picture. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot cracking through the silence. $600,000. "Dad," Jasmine said, her voice trembling, not with sadness but with rage. "We need it by tomorrow morning, or they are going to hurt him." I looked at the papers. They were not hospital bills. They were not mortgage foreclosure notices due to a bad economy. They were gambling debts, lines of credit from shady lenders and high-interest loans from names that sounded more like threats than banks. I slowly took a sip of my water and looked at Blake. He was pacing by the window, refusing to meet my eyes. "So this is it," I said, my voice low and steady. "The big investment opportunity you told me about last Christmas, cryptocurrency and virtual real estate." Blake stopped pacing and spun around, his face flushing red. "Don T, start with your lectures, Morgan," he spat out, waving his hand. "Dismissively, you wouldn't understand modern finance. You spent your life covered in grease-fixing engines. This is the future. The market just took a temporary dip. I need liquidity to cover the margin call. Once the market rebounds, I will pay you back. Double." I looked at him. This man who had never done a day of hard physical labor in his life. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. Yet he looked cheap. He stood there in my house eating my food and calling my life as work grease. "You call it grease, I call it physics," I said, leaning back in my chair when a 40-ton truck is barreling down a highway at 60 miles per hour. It does not care about the market or liquidity. It cares about friction, heat, and the integrity of the steel. I designed the brakes that stop those trucks. "Blake, if I made a calculation error, people died. If you make a calculation error, you just come to my house and demand my pension." Blake laughed, a cold, humorless sound that made my skin crawl. "See, Jasmine," he said, turning to my daughter, "I told you he wouldn't get it. He is stuck in the past, obsessed with his manual labor. Glory days. Listen, Morgan, the world has moved on. Nobody cares about how hard you worked with your hands. We care about leverage, and right now you are the only one with leverage. So stop being selfish and write the check. Selfish." The word hung in the air. I looked at my hands resting on the table. They were dark, thick, and scarred. There was a burn mark on my left thumb from a welding accident in 1985. There was a callus on my index finger that never went away. These hands had built things. These hands had saved lives. These hands had held Coretta when she took her last breath. And now these hands were being asked to sign away the security I had built for myself to save a man who despised me. "I am not doing it," I said simply. "I am not bailing you out of a hole. You dug yourself." Blake Jasmine slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. She leaned in close, her face twisted into a mask I did not recognize. This was not the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle. This was a stranger, desperate and dangerous. "You have to," she hissed. "Do you think this is a game, Dad? These people are not banks. They are criminals. If Blake does not pay, they will kill him, and if they kill him, I will be a widow and your grandchild will grow up without a father." I froze. Grandchild. I looked at her stomach. She was wearing a loose blouse. "Yes," she said, seeing my gaze. "I am pregnant. Dad. 8 weeks. Do you want your grandchild's first memory to be visiting their father in the cemetery, or maybe visiting him in prison because if he doesn't pay, he goes down for fraud too? Is that what you want for your legacy?" I looked at Blake. He was smirking now. He knew she had played the ace card. He adjusted his tie, looking confident again as if he had already won. He thought he had me cornered. He thought that, like every other time in the past, I would bow my head, sigh, and open my checkbook. Because I was Morgan the provider. Morgan the rock. Morgan who absorbed every blow so his family could stay soft. I looked down at my plate. The pot roast was cold. The gravy had congealed. The rosemary scent was gone, replaced by the smell of expensive cologne and desperation. I thought about the 3 patents I held specifically for the pneumatic valve release system in commercial haulers. Blake and Jasmine knew I had a pension, but they did not know about the royalties. They did not know that those patents generated more money in a year than Blake had made in his entire life. They saw an old man in a modest house. They did not see the architect of their potential salvation. But as I looked at Blake, smirk, and Jasmine, expectant, demanding eyes, I realized something my money could save. Blake's legs from being broken, but it could not fix what was broken in them. My money would not buy their respect. It would only buy their silence until the next time they needed something, and there would always be a next time. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs slowly. I let the silence stretch out until Blake started tapping his foot impatiently. "Okay," I said softly. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. Jasmine let out a breath she had been holding and slumped into a chair. Blake clapped his hands together and let out a loud whoop of victory. "I knew it," Blake said, pointing a finger at me. "I knew you were a reasonable man. Morgan, you are doing the right thing for the family." "I need to go to the bank in the morning," I said, keeping my face completely neutral. "I cannot transfer that amount over the phone. I will need to go to the main branch downtown as soon as they open at 9. "Fine," Jasmine said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "We will come pick you up at 8:30 sharp. Be ready, Dad. And have your ID and all the paperwork we done. Do want any hiccups?" "I will be ready," I said. They did not stay for dinner. They did not ask how I was feeling. They did not say thank you, Blake. Grabbed a roll from the bread basket as he walked out, stuffing it into his mouth like he owned the place. Jasmine gave me a quick, distracted kiss on the cheek, her mind already moving on to how she would spend the leftover money once the debt was paid. "See you tomorrow, Morgan," Blake called out as the front door closed. I sat there in the silence of my empty house for a long time. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7 p.m. I stood up and cleared the table. I scraped the untouched pot roast into the trash. I washed the dishes, dried them, and put them away. Then I walked down the hall to my study. I did not go to the bedroom to sleep. I went to the wall safe hidden behind the framed patent of my first brake design. I spun the dial. Right, left, right, click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside was not a checkbook. Inside was a black passport, a stack of euros, and a single small USB drive. I took the items out and placed them on my desk. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized, but never thought I would have to use hello. "A woman's voice answered, crisp and professional on the other end. "Mrs. Patel." "It is. Morgan," I said, my voice steady. "Start the protocol. Sell the portfolio, close the accounts, and book me the next flight out of Atlanta. I don't care where it is going, as long as it is across the ocean." There was a pause on the other end. Then Mrs. Patel spoke softly. "Are you sure, Morgan? Once we execute this, there is no turning back." I looked at the empty spot on the placemat where Coretta S. picture usually sat. I thought about Blake S. smirk. I thought about Jasmine using an unborn child as a bargaining chip. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. I hung up the phone and walked to the closet to get my suitcase. I had 12 hours before they returned. 12 hours to erase 68 years of a life and start a new one. Getting the money was never the problem for me. The problem was realizing that I was paying for a life that no longer belonged to me. Tomorrow morning when they arrive at 8:30 sharp, the only thing waiting for them will be a locked door and a lesson they will never forget. The sun had barely risen over the Atlanta skyline when my security cameras picked up the black SUV swerving into my driveway, kicking up dust and gravel in a display of impatience that perfectly summarized my son-in-law. Blake looked at his watch before the car had even come to a full stop. It was 8:25 in the morning, 5 minutes early for once in his life. But greed has a way of making even the laziest men punctual. I watched the live feed from my tablet thousands of miles away, feeling the hum of the jet engines beneath my feet and the smooth leather of a first-class seat against my back. It was a strange sensation watching the destruction of my old life while sipping orange juice in the stratosphere. Jasmine stepped out of the car. First, she was wearing an oversized pair of sunglasses to hide the stress lines around her eyes and holding a venti coffee cup like a shield. She did not look at the garden I had spent 20 years cultivating. She did not look at the porch swing where her mother used to read to her. She marched straight to the front door with the entitlement of a landlord coming to collect rent. Blake trailed behind her, tapping his foot nervously on the concrete walkway, his eyes darting toward the street as if he expected the loan sharks to pop out from behind my hydrangeas. I watched as Jasmine rang the doorbell once, then twice. Then she leaned on it, letting the chime echo continuously through the empty house. I had disabled the chime inside, but I knew exactly how annoying that sound was. She waited 10 seconds before banging her fist against the wood. "Open up, Dad. We do not have time for games. The bank opens in 30 minutes and we need to be first in line." Silence was her only answer. Blake pushed her aside, his patience already evaporated. "Morgan, open the damn door. I know you are in there. We saw the lights on last night, Don, to make me break it down." I had indeed left the hall light on, a small investment of electricity to give them a false sense of security, to make them believe the old man was shuffling around inside looking for his checkbook, finding his glasses, preparing to save them one last time. Hope is a cruel thing when it is false, and I wanted them to be full of it before the fall. Blake moved to the window, cupping his hands against the glass to peer inside. I could see his breath fogging up the pane. He squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes in the living room. Then he pulled back, looking confused. "The curtains are drawn," he muttered. "I can see anything. He is probably sleeping." "Jasmine, call him again." She pulled out her phone and dialed my number on the screen of my tablet. A notification popped up. "Incoming call. Daughter." I swiped it away, sending it straight to voicemail, just as I had done for the past 12 hours. She stomped her foot, her face turning a shade of red that matched the bricks of the walkway, straight to voicemail. He turned his phone off. "Blake, do something." Blake looked around the neighborhood, ensuring none of the neighbors were watching. Then he walked over to the decorative rock garden by the entrance, picked up a heavy river stone and smashed it through the glass panel of the side door. The sound of shattering glass was sharp and violent, a definitive end to the sanctity of my home. They reached in, unlocked the deadbolt, and pushed the door open, stepping over the shards of glass without a second thought. They were inside now. I switched the camera view to the living room. Cam hidden inside the smoke detector. The audio feed crackled to life, picking up their heavy breathing and the crunch of glass under their shoes. "Dad." Jasmine yelled, her voice echoing strangely in the hallway. "Dad, where are you? We are running late." They rushed into the living room and froze. It was a moment I had played out in my head a dozen times, but seeing it in reality was far more satisfying. The room was not empty in the traditional sense. The sofa was there. The coffee table was there, even the television stand was there, but the soul of the room had been surgically removed. The walls where my collection of African-American art had hung for decades were bare, leaving only pale rectangular ghosts on the wallpaper. Seeing the outlines where the paintings used to be was more haunting than a blank wall. The massive grandfather clock that had been in my family for 3 generations, the one Blake always complained was too loud, was gone. The display cabinet that held my vintage watch collection, including the Patek Philippe Blake had tried to steal last Thanksgiving, was empty, the glass doors left wide open to mock them. "Where is everything?" Jasmine whispered, spinning around in a circle. "Where are the paintings? Where is the clock?" Blake ignored the decor. He sprinted toward the hallway leading to my study, the only room that mattered to him, the room where he thought the safe was. I switched cameras again, following his frantic movements. He burst into the study and stopped dead in his tracks. My desk was cleared, the filing cabinets were open and empty, drawers pulled out and left hanging like tongues from a dead mouth. The safe behind the patent frame was wide open, its dark interior gaping and hollow. No, 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 Blake chanted, dropping to his knees and frantically feeling inside the empty safe, hoping to find a hidden compartment, a forgotten envelope, anything. It is gone, Jasmine. It is all gone. Jasmine ran into the room, her eyes wide with panic. What do you mean gone? He can't just take everything. He is an old man. He has a bad back. How could he move all this? He didn't move the furniture. Blake snapped, standing up and kicking the empty metal trash can. He left the cheap stuff. Look. He left the desk, he left the chair, he only took the things that are worth money, the watches, the bonds, the cash. He liquidated everything. They stood there in the center of the room, the reality of their situation crashing down on them like a collapsing roof, $600,000 in debt, and the bank they had planned to rob was not just closed, it had been demolished. Then Jasmine saw it. On the center of the mahogany desk, which I had polished one last time before leaving, sat a small, plain cardboard box. It was the only thing in the room that looked deliberate, placed with geometric precision in the exact center of the blotter. "What is that?" she asked, pointing a shaking finger. Blake lunged for it, tearing the lid off with the desperation of a starving animal. He upended the box onto the desk, expecting keys, a check, a note explaining where the money was. 2 items fell out with a dull clatter. The first was a silver USB drive, simple and nondescript. The second was a coin, a dirty, tarnished silver dollar from 1964. It spun on the desk for a moment before settling tails up. Blake stared at the coin, his face twisting in confusion. What is this trash? Why would he leave? Why? A dirty quarter. I smiled in my seat. 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. Blake did not remember, but I did 2 years ago at a barbecue. He had seen that coin on my dresser and asked why I kept such garbage. I told him it was the first dollar I ever earned, working at a mechanic shop when I was 12 years old. He had laughed and called it a symbol of a poverty mindset, telling me that rich people don't hoard change, they leverage assets. He had flicked it back onto the dresser with a sneer, letting it bounce onto the floor. I had picked it up, cleaned it, and saved it for this exact moment. "It is not trash," Jasmine whispered, picking up the coin, her hand trembling. "He told me once it was his lucky coin," he said. "He would never part with it unless he had lost everything, or unless he was starting a new life." "Check the drive," Blake yelled, grabbing the USB and jamming it into the side of his laptop, which he had brought along to transfer the funds immediately. He fumbled with the keys, his sweat dripping, onto the trackpad until the folder opened. There was only one file, a video named The Settlement MP4. He clicked play on the screen of his laptop. My face appeared. I was wearing my best tailored Italian suit, holding a flute of vintage Dom Perignon. The background was not my dusty study, but the plush leather interior of a first-class cabin with the clouds visible through the window behind me. The hum of the airplane in the video harmonized with the hum of the airplane in my reality, creating a perfect circle of time. "Hello, Jasmine. Hello." Blake, the video version of me, said calmly, taking a sip of the champagne. "If you are watching this, it means you have successfully broken into my house, destroyed my property, and proven once again that your respect for me ends where your need for my money begins." Blake screamed at the screen. "Shut up and tell us where the money is, you senile old bat." "The video," Morgan continued as if anticipating the interruption. "By now you have noticed that the house is a bit lighter. The watches, the art, the rare books, I sold them all yesterday to a private collector, a very discreet gentleman who paid in cryptocurrency, immediate transfer, untraceable and tax efficient. Just like you always told me. Blake, modern finance is truly a wonder." Jasmine let out a sob, clutching the edge of the desk. "Dad, please don't do this. They will kill him." I looked at my watch in the video, checking the time. "You are probably wondering about the $600,000 you need by this morning. Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that I have the money. In fact, I have significantly more than that, thanks to the sale of my assets and the liquidation of my pension." Blake's eyes lit up a flicker of hope amidst the despair. "Send it," he yelled at the screen. "Just wire it, you old fool." "The bad news," the video me said, leaning forward and looking directly into the camera lens, looking directly into their souls, is that I have decided to invest it in a venture with a much higher return on investment than Blake's gambling debts. I am investing it in myself. I have spent 68 years being a father, a husband, a provider, and a safety net. Today, I am retiring from all those positions. I stood up in the video, walking over to the window to look out at the sea of clouds below. Do not bother looking for me. I have hired a firm to scrub my digital footprint. You will not find me on social media. You will not find my credit card transactions, and you certainly will not find me in Atlanta. Regarding the house, Jasmine, since you like it so much, you can keep it. Oh, wait, you can't. I forgot to mention that I stopped paying the property taxes 5 years ago and used a loophole to defer the payments until the owner vacated the premises. Since I have vacated, the county will be seizing the property in roughly 48 hours. I suggest you grab the microwave. It is still under warranty. Blake slammed his fist onto the desk, making the laptop jump. You can't do this. This is illegal. You can't just abandon us. I turned back to the camera in the video and raised my glass in a toast. You told me yesterday that I was Grease, Blake, that I was the past. Well, you were right. The past is gone, and the future is waiting. Enjoy the coin. It is the only inheritance you will ever see from me. The game begins now. The screen went black. In the study, the silence was absolute, heavy and suffocating. Seeing the look on their faces, the mixture of horror, rage, and the dawning realization that they were completely alone with their demons was worth every penny of the flight ticket. I closed my tablet and handed my empty glass to the flight attendant. "More champagne, sir?" she asked with a warm smile. "Yes, please," I said, looking out the window as the coast of America disappeared behind me. "Keep it coming. I am celebrating a new beginning." Back in the house, Blake stared at the black screen, his breathing coming in ragged gasps. His phone on the desk began to vibrate, buzzing angrily against the wood. The caller. ID flashed a name that made Jasmine cover her mouth to stifle a scream. The shark was calling and the water was full of blood. The sound of tearing paper is distinct. It sounds like a dry cough in a quiet room. And that was the only sound filling my study as Blake tore through 20 years of my filing system. He was not looking for sentimentality. He was looking for salvation. I watched from the screen of my iPad in my hotel room in Paris as he pulled drawers out of the mahogany desk I had restored myself, throwing them onto the floor with a violence that made me wince, even from 4,000 miles away. Jasmine stood by the doorway, her arms crossed, hugging herself as if trying to keep her expensive composure from falling apart. She was not helping him search. She felt she was above manual labor, even when it was a felony in progress. "He has to have accounts," Blake muttered, sweating through his shirt. "He has to have paper statements somewhere. Old people don't trust the cloud, they keep paper. Morgan is a hoarder. He kept a coin for 50 years. He has to have the bank records." He pulled down a row of encyclopedias from the shelf, shaking them by the spine, hoping cash would fall out. Nothing fell out but dust and a dried flower Coretta had pressed in 1992. Seeing that flower hit the floor and get crushed under Blake's expensive Italian loafer sparked a cold fire in my chest that I knew would never go out. "There is nothing here," Blake screamed. Kicking a pile of National Geographic magazines, he liquidated it all. "Jasmine, he left us nothing. He knew we were coming and he scorched the earth." "Wait," Jasmine said, stepping into the room, her eyes locking onto something behind the radiator. "Look there, behind the heating unit, there is a blue folder stuck between the wall and the metal." Blake dropped to his knees, scrambling over the mess he had created. He reached his hand into the dusty gap and pulled out a thick blue folder. The edges were worn and the label was yellowed with age. It looked like trash. It looked like something I had forgotten about decades ago, but in reality I had placed it there knowing that a desperate man looks in the shadows first, knowing that they would believe a discovery was genuine only if they had to work for it. He wiped the dust off the cover and read the label aloud. "Patent US 98234, Mechanical Braking Energy Recovery System." "What is that?" Jasmine asked, wrinkling her nose. "Is it an instruction manual?" Blake did not answer. He opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents inside. His breathing stopped. I could see his lips moving as he read the technical abstract, but it was not the engineering schematics that caught his attention. It was the royalty statement attached to the back page from the previous fiscal year. "Oh my God," Blake whispered, and he sat back on his heels, the folder resting on his knees like a holy scripture. "What is it?" Jasmine asked, stepping closer, her curiosity piquing. "He is not just a mechanic," Blake said, his voice sounding hollow. "He is an inventor. Jasmine, look at this. Look at the numbers." I zoomed in on the camera feed, watching the realization wash over them for years. They had treated me like a simple laborer, a man who fixed things. Other people broke. They mocked my dirty fingernails and my work boots. They assumed my pension was a pittance and my savings were meager. They never asked about my work. They never asked about the nights I spent drawing blueprints at the kitchen table while they slept. They never knew that the regenerative braking system used in 60% of all mid-sized delivery trucks on the road today was born in that very room. Jasmine snatched the paper from him and read the bottom line. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers, not with relief, not with pride, but with a sudden dark fury that twisted her pretty face into something ugly. $842,000, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. He made $842,000 last year alone, just from licensing fees. That is not all, Blake said, flipping the page. Look at the cumulative total over the last 10 years. Morgan has earned over $7 million in passive income. $7 million, Jasmine. And he drives a 15-year-old truck. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of indignation. He lied to us, Jasmine screamed, throwing the paper onto the desk. She began to pace the small room, her hands balling into fists. He stood there in the kitchen yesterday, watching us, watching us. Panic about $600,000, and he had $7 million sitting in the bank. He watched you almost cry. Blake, and he didn't say a word. He is a monster. I took a sip of my coffee in Paris, feeling a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. It was fascinating to watch the mental gymnastics they were performing. Within seconds. They forgot about the missing furniture. They forgot about the locked door. They even forgot about the threat to Blake's life. All they saw was the betrayal of an old man who dared to keep his own money. That is my inheritance, Jasmine yelled, pointing at the empty chair where I used to sit. That is my money. He has been hoarding it, living like a monk just to spite us. He knew we needed help with the mortgage. He knew we wanted to upgrade the car, and he sat on millions. He is selfish, Blake agreed, standing up and dusting off his knees. He thinks he is better than us because he worked for it. He probably plans to spend it all on some stupid charity or leave it to a cat shelter. Well, not anymore. The narrative had shifted in their minds. I was no longer the victim of their extortion. I was the villain who had withheld their birthright in their twisted logic. My frugality was a personal attack on their lifestyle. My silence was deceit, and my money was actually their money that I was merely holding on to until they were ready to spend. We can fix this, Blake said, his eyes gleaming with a new, dangerous light. We can fix everything with this kind of money. $600,000 is nothing. We can pay off the debt. We can buy a new house. We can start the business again properly this time. But he is gone, Jasmine said, stopping her pacing. He left the country. Blake, he took the access codes. He is gone physically. Blake said, a cruel smile spreading across his face, but legally, he is still here. And looking at this mess, looking at how he disappeared without a word, leaving the stove on, leaving the door unlocked. We can make a case, Jasmine. Make a case for what she asked. For mental incompetence, Blake said, tapping the blue folder against his palm. We go to court. We tell the judge, your father has dementia. He has been acting erratic, hiding money, forgetting. He has millions living in squalor. We file for emergency guardianship. Once we have guardianship, we control the assets. We control the patent. We control the $7 million. Watch them plot my demise with a cold detachment, seeing your own child discuss how to declare you insane so she can steal your life. This work is a specific kind of heartbreak that numbs you rather than hurts. It was the final confirmation that the daughter I raised had truly died years ago, replaced by this creature of appetite and envy. Just then, Blake's phone began to vibrate on the desk, dancing across the polished wood like a beetle. The caller ID was blocked, but we all knew who it was. The color drained from Blake's face, the arrogance of the discovery, vanishing instantly, replaced by the primal fear of a man who knows he is hunted. He picked up the phone, his hand shaking. "Hello?" Blake answered, his voice cracking. I could not hear the other side of the conversation, but I did not need to. I saw Blake wince. I saw him nod, rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. Again, "Please listen," Blake stammered. Interruption, the person on the other end. "I know I said today, but the situation has changed. No, don't come here. Listen to me. I have the money not on me, but it is here, my father-in-law. He is not just a retiree." Blake looked at Jasmine, seeking reassurance. She nodded vigorously, mouthing the words, Tell him Tell him he is rich. My father-in-law is a silent partner in major automotive tech. Blake lied, his voice gaining strength from the blue folder he is holding. Millions in assets. I just found the papers. He is helping me with the transfer, but it takes time. These are high-level assets. We need 48 hours, just 48 hours to process the liquidation. There was a long pause. Blake held his breath, his eyes squeezed shut. Yes, Blake said, exhaling loudly. Yes. 48 hours. I swear on my life you will have the full amount. Plus interest. Just give me 2 days. He hung up the phone and slumped against the desk, sliding down until he hit the floor. He looked at Jasmine, a manic grin spreading across his face. We are saved, he said. We just need to get power of attorney, declare him incompetent, and all of this is ours. Within 2 days. Jasmine knelt beside him, hugging him tightly. Oh, thank God, she sobbed. We are going to be rich, Blake. We are going to be so rich, and Dad won't be able to stop us. I turned off the tablet screen, plunging the hotel room into darkness. Blake had just bought himself 2 days of life by selling a lie he could not deliver, and he had no idea that the patent he was holding was not the only copy, and more importantly, he had no idea that I had already transferred the rights to that patent to a holding company in the Cayman Islands 3 days ago. They thought they had found a treasure map, but all they had found was an anchor, and they had just tied it around their own necks. The loan sharks would be back in 48 hours, and when they found out there was no money coming, the rage they felt toward me would seem like a gentle caress compared to what they would do to Blake. I lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, ready to sleep for the first time in years, without the weight of their expectations on my chest. The game was getting interesting, and I was the only one who knew the rules. I sat on the balcony of my hotel room in Paris, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. It was a beautiful sight, but the view on my laptop screen was far more captivating. I had authorized my lawyer, Mrs. Patel, to activate Phase 2 of the protocol at exactly noon. Atlanta time, I knew my children better than they knew themselves. I knew that when faced with a crisis, Jasmine sought comfort in spending money she did not have, and Blake sought escape by selling things he did not own. They were predictable, and their predictability was their downfall. Jasmine was the first to fall into the trap. The GPS tracker on her phone, which was part of the family plan I paid for, showed her entering the Lenox Square Mall. She walked into the flagship Louis Vuitton store with the confidence of a woman who had never worked a day for the luxury she draped over her shoulders. I could imagine her strutting past the security guard, her eyes scanning the shelves for the most expensive bag she could find. Something to numb the panic of the morning, something to make her feel powerful again. After seeing my empty house, she selected a Capucin's handbag made of python leather priced at $8,000. She carried it to the counter, her chin held high, ignoring the fact that her husband was $600,000 in debt and her father was missing. She placed the Platinum American Express card on the glass counter, a card that bore my name but had been in her wallet since she was a sophomore in college. Charge it, she told the sales associate, not even looking at the price tag. I will take the scarf too. The sales associate, a young woman with a sharp eye for status, smiled professionally and swiped the card through the terminal. Jasmine tapped her manicured nails on the glass, waiting for the receipt, waiting for the dopamine rush that came with a new purchase. The machine beeped a harsh, dissonant sound that cut through the soft jazz playing in the store. The associate frowned and wiped the card on her blazer, assuming it was a smudge. Try it again, she said, swiping it a second time. Declined. The word hung in the air like a foul odor. Jasmine laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that fooled no one. Do not be ridiculous. She said loud enough for the other customers to hear that card has a $50,000 limit. Try it manually, your machine is obviously broken. The associate looked at the screen, her professional smile vanishing, replaced by a look of suspicion. Actually, Ma, the machine is working perfectly. The system has flagged this card. Flagged for what? Jasmine snapped, her voice rising. Flagged for being too exclusive. Just run it again, or I will call your manager. The associate did not run it again. Instead, she reached under the counter and pressed a silent button on the floor. The card has been reported stolen, Ma-am. The instructions from the issuer are to confiscate the card and detain the user until security arrives. Stolen Jasmine screamed. her face turning a violent shade of red. "That is my father's card. I have had it for 10 years. Give it back to me right now, you incompetent girl." I watched the security feed Mrs. Patel had managed to hack into, thanks to a favor from a former client in the security sector. Watching my daughter unravel was like watching a car crash in slow motion. She lunged for the card, but the associate pulled it back just as two uniformed mall security guards stepped up behind Jasmine. Please step away from the counter," one of the guards said, his hand resting on his belt. "Do not touch me," Jasmine shrieked, spinning around to face them. "Do you know who I am? My father is Morgan Mitchell. He is a wealthy investor. He will sue this entire mall into the ground. Your father is the one who reported the card stolen, ma'am," the guard said calmly, his voice devoid of emotion. "We received a priority alert from the credit card company 10 minutes ago, identifying you by name. Jasmine Mitchell is to be detained for attempted fraud using a stolen instrument." The color drained from Jasmine's face for the first time in her life. The name Morgan Mitchell was not a key that opened doors. It was the lock that slammed them shut. The other shoppers were staring now, whispering behind, their hands filming the scene with their phones. Jasmine, the life coach who preached about abundance and manifestation, was being escorted out of a luxury store like a common shoplifter, crying and begging for a phone call that no one would answer. Meanwhile, across town, Blake was busy digging his own grave. He was in my detached garage, standing in front of the one thing I loved almost as much as I loved Coretta, my 1967 Shelby GT500 Mustang. It was not just a car. It was a masterpiece of American engineering. I had restored every bolt, every valve, and every inch of upholstery with my own hands. Blake saw it only as a pile of cash on wheels. He had called a shady car dealer, a man known for asking 0 questions and paying in cash. The deal was simple: $40,000 for a car, worth $200,000, a quick sale for quick money to pay off the sharks. Blake did not care about the loss. He just needed to survive the week. I heard the engine roar to life through the garage security camera. Blake revved the engine hard cold, creating a cloud of blue smoke that made me grit my teeth. He did not let it warm up. He did not check the oil. He just slammed it into reverse, grinding the gears with a sickening crunch, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the pavement. He drove fast, weaving through the afternoon traffic, smoking a cigarette inside the cabin, creating a stench that would take weeks to remove. He thought he was free. He thought he was clever. He was already mentally spending the $40,000, imagining how he would silence the loan sharks and maybe have enough left over for a night at the casino. He did not notice the police cruiser sitting in the speed trap on Piedmont Avenue until the blue and red lights filled his rearview mirror. Blake cursed, hitting the steering wheel. He pulled over expecting a speeding ticket. He could handle a ticket. He would just charm the officer. Drop a few names and be on his way. The officer approached the car, his hand on his holster license and registration. He said, his eyes hidden behind aviator sunglasses. Blake smiled, his best salesman smile, "Officer, I know I was going a little fast, but this is a classic car. You know how it is. Sometimes you just have to let the horses run. I don't have the registration on me. It is my father-in-law's car, and he is out of town and asked me to take it for a spin to keep the battery charged." The officer did not smile, step out of the vehicle. "Sir." "What for?" Blake asked, his smile faltering. "It is just a speeding ticket, right? Step out of the vehicle, now." The officer repeated, his voice hard and commanding. Blake opened the door and stepped out, raising his hands halfway in a gesture of surrender. "Look, officer, my name is Blake Henderson. My father-in-law is Morgan Mitchell. You can check the plates. We are family. I checked the plates before I pulled you over," the officer said, spinning Blake around and slamming him against the hood of the Mustang. The heat from the engine burned Blake's cheek, but the cold steel of the handcuffs on his wrists burned more. "That vehicle was reported stolen 3 hours ago by Mr. Morgan Mitchell," the officer said, tightening the cuffs. The report specifically stated that a family member might attempt to take it without authorization, and that the suspect should be considered desperate. "Stolen," Blake yelled, spitting onto the hood of my car. "I didn't steal it. I am his son-in-law. I have permission. Call him, just call him. He will tell you. Mr. Mitchell is currently out of the country and unreachable," the officer said, patting Blake down and finding the title to the car in his back pocket, which Blake had forged my signature on poorly. "You are under arrest for grand theft, auto forgery, and reckless driving." They shoved him into the back of the cruiser, his face pressed against the window, watching as a tow truck arrived to take my Mustang away, carefully treating it with the respect Blake never did. That night, the family reunion took place not at a dinner table but in the holding cells of the Fulton County Jail. Jasmine had been processed for credit card fraud and resisting arrest because she had tried to slap the security guard Blake was in for grand theft, auto, and forgery because they were married, and their crimes were linked to the same victim they were placed in. Holding cells adjacent to each other, separated by a thick pane of glass and wire mesh. I paid a substantial fee to a private investigator to get the audio recording from the holding area, knowing that their conversation would be the sweetest music I could ever hear. "This is your fault," Jasmine hissed through the wire mesh, her hair messy, her mascara running down her face, looking like a raccoon caught in the rain. "You told me he was gone. You told me we could use the assets." "He is gone," Blake yelled back, kicking the metal bench in his cell. "He is in Paris or hell for all I know, but he set traps. Jasmine, who reports their own daughter for shopping, who reports their own car stolen when their son-in-law is driving it." "A man who hates us," Jasmine whispered, sinking to the floor of the cell, pulling her knees to her chest. "He planned this. Blake, he didn't just leave, he declared war. He wants to destroy us. He is doing a pretty good job," Blake muttered, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had chafed. "He cut us off completely, Jasmine. I used my one phone call to call the bank. All our joint accounts are frozen. He must have alerted them about the debt investigation. We have $0. Jasmine, actually, we have less than zero. We have bail, set at $50,000 each, and we don't even have 50 cents. And the sharks?" Jasmine asked, her voice trembling. "The loan sharks. Blake, what happens when they find out we are in here and we don't have the money?" Blake went pale in the dim light of the jail cell. He looked small, pathetic, and terrified. The arrogance that had defined him for years was gone, stripped away by the harsh reality of consequences. "They will think we are hiding," he whispered. "They will think we got arrested on purpose to avoid them when we get out. If we get out, they will be waiting." I closed my laptop in my hotel room. The silence of the Paris night was comforting. My children were safe in a concrete box protected by the state from the criminals they had borrowed money from. In a way, I had saved their lives just like Jasmine asked, but I had done it on my terms. They wanted me to pay their debt. I was paying it with lessons. Justice is a currency that never devaluates. And tonight I was a very rich man. Tomorrow the real pain would begin, because tomorrow the sharks would learn that their prey was trapped in a cage, and sharks love a captive audience. The coffee in Paris tastes different, not because the beans are superior, but because it is drunk in freedom, sitting on the wrought iron balcony of my hotel room overlooking the Seine. I watched the city of light wake up, feeling a lightness in my chest that I had not felt since Coretta passed away. But while my body was resting, my mind was still at war. On the screen of my laptop, Mrs. Patel's face appeared sharp and focused against the blurred background of her office in Atlanta. She was the general of my legal army, and today we were launching a psychological strike. "The file is queued up. Morgan?" Mrs. Patel said, her voice. Coming through my noise-canceling headphones, crystal clear. "Do you really want to send this? It is incredibly personal." I took a slow sip of the coffee, letting the warmth spread through me before answering. "I do not do this lightly. Mrs. Patel, for 10 years, I protected Jasmine from the truth. I let her believe her mother died of a broken heart caused by stress. I let her believe she was the perfect daughter because I wanted to preserve her memory of Coretta. But silence is not protection anymore. Silence is permission. She needs to hear this. She needs to know that her greed did not just start last week. It started a decade ago, and it killed the best woman I ever knew." "Send it," I said. Mrs. Patel nodded once and typed a command on her keyboard, sending a digital ghost flying across the Atlantic Ocean straight into the inbox of a woman who thought she could outrun her past. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away in the humid darkness of Atlanta, Jasmine was pacing the living room of her own house. The air conditioning had been cut off 3 hours ago. Another bill unpaid, another luxury stripped away, leaving the air stagnant and heavy. Blake sat on the expensive beige sofa, his head in his hands, the glow of his phone illuminating his sweaty face. He was frantically trying to sell his collection of vintage sneakers on an online marketplace, hoping to scrape together enough cash to buy them another day of safety. "We need to call him again," Blake muttered, not looking up. "Maybe he will answer this time. Maybe he will pity us." "He won't answer," Jasmine snapped, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "He is enjoying this." "Blake, don't you get it? He is probably watching us right now, laughing. He wants us to suffer. Her phone chimed a sharp, piercing sound in the quiet room. Jasmine froze her eyes, darting to the device sitting on the glass coffee table. It was not a text message tone. It was the custom notification sound she had set for emails labeled high priority. She snatched the phone up, her heart pounding against her ribs, hoping against hope that it was a miracle that maybe the bank had made a mistake or that Morgan had changed his mind. Her thumb hovered over the screen. The subject line was simple, just one word: Coretta Jasmine S. Breath hitched. She stared at the name of her dead mother glowing on the screen, a name she hadn't spoken with, reverence in years seeing it. There sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She looked at the sender. It was from an anonymous, encrypted address. "Who is it?" Blake asked, sensing the shift in her mood. "Is it him?" "It is an email," Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling. "It is titled, Coretta." "Open it," Blake said, sitting up, his greed overriding his fear. Maybe there is an insurance policy, maybe there is a hidden trust fund we didn't know about. "Open it, Jasmine." She tapped the screen, opening the email. There was no text, no explanation, just a single audio attachment labeled July 14th, 2014. Jasmine stared at the date that was 2 months before her mother died. She remembered that summer. It was the summer she had toured Europe with her college friends, the summer she had come back with designer bags and stories of parties in Ibiza. She pressed play. The sound that filled the room was not music. It was the sound of a woman crying, a deep, guttural sobbing that sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Then a voice spoke, a voice that Jasmine had not heard in 10 years but recognized instantly. "I don't know what to do, Morgan," the voice of Coretta said, broken and weak. "I went to the bank today to withdraw the money for the chemotherapy, copay. The account is empty. Morgan, the entire pension fund is gone." Jasmine's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp on the recording. She heard the heavy footsteps of her father walking across the floor, and his voice younger and stronger than it was now, soothing and calm. "It must be a mistake, Coretta. I will go down there and fix it." "Don't cry, sweetheart. We will fix it. It is not a mistake," Coretta sobbed, and the pain in her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "I saw the withdrawal slip. Morgan, it was signed by me, but I didn't sign it. It was Jasmine S. handwriting. I know my own daughter S. handwriting. She forged my signature. Morgan, she took $40,000 out of the medical fund." Jasmine squeezed her eyes shut, unwilling to listen but unable to turn it off. "She took it for that trip," Coretta continued, her voice rising in hysteria. "She took my cancer money to go to Europe. Morgan, she knew I was sick. She knew we needed that money, and she took it anyway to buy clothes and drink champagne. She chose a vacation over my life." On the recording, there was a long silence, a silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air out of the room. Then Morgan spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I will put it back, Coretta. I will sell the truck. I will work double shifts. Do not tell her. You know, if you confront her now, she will run away, and we will lose her forever. Let me handle the money. You just focus on getting better." "She is a thief, Morgan," Coretta wailed, and it was the sound of a mother's heart breaking into a million pieces. "I raised a thief. I raised a monster who looks at her dying mother and sees an ATM machine." The recording ended with a click, leaving a deafening silence in the dark living room. Blake looked at Jasmine, his mouth hanging open. He had heard rumors that Jasmine came from money, that she was spoiled, but he had never known this. He looked at his wife with a mixture of horror and realization, seeing her clearly for the first time. "You stole her cancer money," Blake whispered, his voice filled with disgust. "You told me your parents paid for that Europe trip. You told me they wanted you to see the world before you started working." Jasmine lowered the phone, her face twisting not into sorrow, not into shame, but into a mask of pure defensive rage. She threw the phone onto the couch, bouncing it off the cushion. "She is dead!" Jasmine screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "She has been dead for 10 years. Why is she doing this to me now? Why is he bringing this up?" "You stole from your dying mother," Blake said, standing up, backing away from her like she was contagious. "That is low, Jasmine. Even for us, that is low, Don T. You judge me," Jasmine yelled, stepping toward him, poking him hard in the chest. "You think you are a saint. Blake, you gambled away our mortgage, but I was 22 years old. I made a mistake. I didn't think she was that sick. I thought she was exaggerating. Dad always had money. I thought he would just replace it." "She died 2 months later," Blake said quietly. "And that is not my fault," Jasmine shrieked, throwing her hands in the air. "People get sick, people die. That is life, but Dad is alive, and he is doing this on purpose. He kept that recording for 10 years, Blake. 10 years. He saved it just to use it as a weapon. He is the monster, not me. He is vindictive. He is cruel. He is haunting me with a ghost." She began to pace frantically, kicking at the furniture, kicking at the empty shopping bags scattered on the floor. "He thinks this will break me," she ranted, talking more to herself than to Blake. "He thinks hearing her cry will make me beg for forgiveness. Well, it won't. She is gone and I am here. I am the one who needs money. I am the one who is alive. He should be helping the living, not worshiping the dead. He is a sick old man holding onto a grudge like a dog with a bone." Blake watched her, his eyes cold. He realized then that there was no bottom to Jasmine's selfishness. There was no depth she wouldn't sink to in order to justify her actions. She was not a victim. She was a predator who had finally been trapped. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the tension in the room. Glass exploded inward, showering the expensive rug with glittering shards. A heavy object had been hurled through the front window, tearing through the curtains, and landing with a dull thud in the center of the living room. "Floor!" Jasmine screamed, diving behind the sofa. Blake flinched, covering his head with his arms, thinking it was a gunshot, thinking the loan sharks had finally decided to stop calling and start shooting. Silence followed the crash. The wind blew through the broken window, carrying the sounds of the Atlanta night crickets, distant traffic, and the sound of a car engine revving and speeding away. "What was that?" Jasmine whimpered, peering over the back of the sofa. "Is it a bomb?" Blake slowly stood up, walking toward the object on the floor. It was not a bomb. It was a large, jagged rock wrapped in a piece of paper held in place by a thick rubber band. He bent down and picked it up, feeling the weight of the threat in his hands. He pulled the paper free and unfolded it, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. Jasmine crawled out from behind the sofa, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "What does it say?" she asked, clinging to his arm. Blake held the paper up to the dim light of his phone screen. The message was written in red marker, the letters jagged and rushed. "It says 24 hours. Blake read, his voice barely audible. 24 hours for what Jasmine asked, looking at the broken window, looking at the darkness outside. 24 hours until they come inside, Blake said, dropping the note onto the floor. 24 hours to pay, or they take payment in blood. Jasmine stared at the note, and then she looked at the phone where her mother's voice had just accused her of being a monster for the first time. Fear genuinely touched her eyes. Not fear of poverty, not fear of losing status, but the primal fear of a hunted animal, realizing the trap has snapped shut. "He knows," Jasmine whispered, thinking of her father. "He knows they are coming, and he is just watching it happen." I looked at my screen in Paris, watching them stand amidst the broken glass and the ruins of their ego. I did not throw the rock. The loan sharks did that, but I did open the window into their past sometimes to build a future. You have to burn down the lies of the present, and the fire was just starting to catch. The 24-hour deadline. I had watched Blake read from the rock thrown through his window was not a metaphor, and it certainly was not a bluff. Precisely 24 hours later, as the grandfather clock I had removed from the hallway would have struck midnight if it were still there, the front door of my former home did not just open. It exploded inward. I was sitting in the lounge of my hotel suite in Paris, a croissant untouched on the plate beside me, my eyes glued to the security feed. The camera angle from the hallway captured the wood splintering as the deadbolt gave way under the force of a battering ram that looked suspiciously like a sledgehammer, seeing the door to the home I had built to keep my family safe being kicked in by the very danger my daughter had invited into her life gave me a cold, sinking feeling in my gut. But I forced myself to watch because looking away now would be a disservice to the lesson being taught. 3 men stepped through the ruin of the door frame. They were not wearing masks because men like this do not fear the law. They are the law in their world. The leader was a man I recognized from my background checks, a brutal loan collector named Silas who wore bespoke suits to hide the prison tattoos on his neck. Behind him were two enforcers, silent and wide as refrigerators, their presence filling the hallway with a suffocating menace. Jasmine screamed, a sound of pure terror that made the microphone on the security camera distort. She scrambled backward over the back of the sofa, knocking over a lamp, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear into the drywall. Blake did not scream. He froze his face, draining of color until he looked like a wax statue melting under heat. Silas walked into the living room, his polished dress shoes crunching on the glass from the broken window that still littered the floor. He did not look at Jasmine. He did not look at the empty walls where my art used to hang. His eyes locked onto Blake with the intensity of a laser sight. "You are hard to reach, Blake," Silas said, his voice calm and smooth, like oil over gravel. "We called, we texted, we even sent a rock to get your attention, but you seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties with your communication skills." Blake fell to his knees, his hands clasped together in a pathetic gesture of prayer. "Please, Mr. Silas, I can explain. I was going to call you. We just had a setback. A small setback with the bank." Silas sighed, a sound of exaggerated disappointment. Shaking his head slowly, he signaled to the two men behind him. They stepped forward, but they did not move toward Blake. Instead, they moved toward the entertainment center, the altar of vanity Blake had built for himself, using money he did not have. I watched as one of the enforcers picked up the 80-inch curved OLED television. The one Blake had bragged cost him $5,000. He held it up, examining it for a second before smashing it down onto the edge of the coffee table. The screen shattered with a sickening crunch, a spiderweb of cracks obliterating the display. "No!" Blake gasped instinctively, reaching out. "Stop. That is a limited edition." The second enforcer walked over to the custom-built gaming computer, the tower of glass and neon lights that Blake spent more time with than he did with his pregnant wife. He ripped the cords out of the wall, sparking a small flash of electricity, and lifted the heavy machine high above his head with a grunt of exertion. He threw it onto the hardwood floor, the tempered glass case exploding, sending graphics cards and cooling fans skittering across the room like shrapnel. Silas watched the destruction with a bored expression, picking up a bottle of wine from the rack. Blake's pretentious collection of Bordeaux that he drank only to impress guests. He read the label, frowned, and let the bottle drop from his fingers. It smashed on the floor, creating a pool of red liquid that looked disturbingly like blood spreading toward Blake's knees. "You see, Blake," Silas said, stepping over the puddle, "we don't want your toys. We don't want your television or your little computer games. We want our $600,000 plus the late fees, which as of midnight have brought the total to $750,000. "It is not my fault," Blake blubbered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "It is the old man. It is my father-in-law, Morgan Mitchell. He tricked us. He has the money. He has millions in patent royalties. He ran away to Paris and locked the accounts. He is the one you want, not me. I am a victim here." I gripped the edge of my desk in Paris, my knuckles turning white. Hearing him sell me out so quickly, so effortlessly was expected, but it still stung. He was not protecting his wife. He was not taking responsibility. He was pointing a finger at a man 4,000 miles away, hoping the sharks would swim across the ocean and leave him alone. Silas laughed, a cold, dry sound. He crouched down so his face was inches from Blake's, grabbing Blake's chin and forcing him to look up. "I don't know, Morgan Mitchell," Silas whispered, "but I know you. Blake, I lent the money to you. I don't care if your father-in-law is the King of England or a pauper living under a bridge. My contract is with you, and right now you look very insolvent." Jasmine sobbed from the corner. "Please, leave us alone. We have a plan. We are going to get the money. We just need time." Silas stood up and looked at Jasmine for the first time. His eyes traveled over her, evaluating her, not as a woman, but as a commodity. It was a look that made my skin crawl, a look that stripped away her humanity and reduced her to a sum of parts. "Time is expensive," Silas said, walking over to her. Jasmine shrank back, but she was trapped between the wall and the overturned sofa. Silas reached out and touched a lock of her hair, letting it slide through his fingers. "You have a very pretty wife," Blake, Silas said, turning back to my son-in-law. "Very healthy-looking, young, vital. Dawn." "Touch her," Blake whispered. But there was no force behind it, no protective fury. Silas smiled, dropping his hand. "You owe me $750,000, Blake. Usually when people don't pay, we take things. Legs, arms, fingers. But you need your hands to sign checks and you need your legs to walk to the bank, so we have to get creative." He motioned to the wreckage of the living room. "You have 1 week," Silas announced, his voice hardening, losing the veneer of politeness. 1 week to get legal control of your father-in-law's assets. Since you say he is the one with the money, you get guardianship, you get power of attorney. I don't care how you do it. Forge the documents, bribe a judge, just get access to the accounts. And if I can't, Blake asked, his voice trembling so hard the words barely came out. Silas looked at Jasmine again, lingering on her terrified face. "The human body is a fascinating thing," Silas mused, picking a piece of glass off his sleeve. "A healthy kidney can fetch about $150,000 on the black market. A liver creates quite a profit too. And seeing as there are 2 of you, that is 4 kidneys, 2 livers, lots of corneas. You could strip yourselves down for parts and almost make the interest payments." Jasmine let out a strangled cry, covering her abdomen, instinctively protecting the child she was carrying. Though Silas did not know about the pregnancy yet, and God help them if he found out that was another asset to leverage. 1 week, Silas repeated, holding up 1 finger. 7 days. "Blake, if I don't see a wire transfer by next Friday, we are coming back, and we won't be breaking televisions. We will be bringing a surgeon and a cooler filled with ice." He turned and walked toward the ruined door, his enforcers following him, stepping over the smashed remains of Blake's ego at the threshold. Silas stopped and looked back. "Clean this mess up," he said, gesturing to the wine and glass. "It smells like desperation in here." Then they were gone, vanishing into the night as quickly and violently as they had arrived, leaving the door hanging off its hinges and the cold night air rushing into the house. For a long time, neither of them moved. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and Jasmine's ragged breathing. Blake remained on his knees, staring at the pool of wine soaking into the expensive rug I had bought them as a wedding gift. He looked at the smashed computer, the broken television, the debris of the fake life he had constructed. Slowly, stiffly, Blake stood up. He did not go to Jasmine. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not hug her. He walked over to the window and looked out into the darkness, making sure the car was truly gone. Then he turned around. His eyes were different. The fear was still there, but it had been joined by something else, something darker and more calculating. He looked at Jasmine huddled in the corner, shaking and crying. He did not see his wife. He did not see the mother of his unborn child. I watched his gaze drift to her waist, to her side, where her kidneys sat filtering her blood, keeping her alive. I saw the gears turning in his desperate drug-addled mind. "I saw him doing the math," Silas said. "We have assets," Blake whispered, his voice sounding strange in the quiet room. Jasmine looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What are you talking about, Blake?" he said. "He would kill us. He said we have parts." Blake corrected her, staring at her with an intensity that made her flinch. He said, "We have options. If we can get the guardianship, Jasmine, if the judge doesn't believe us about your dad being crazy." He stopped, leaving the sentence hanging in the air, a threat unspoken but clearly heard. Jasmine scrambled to her feet, backing away from him, her hands held up in front of her. "Do not look at me like that. Blake, do not. You dare think about what he said." "We need the money," Blake shouted suddenly, his composure snapping. He kicked the broken television, sending plastic flying. "We need the money. Jasmine, or we are dead. Do you understand? Dead. Your dad did this to us. He put us in this room with these animals. He wants us to be cut open." "You are scaring me," Jasmine cried, backing into the hallway. "Good," Blake said, advancing on her, his eyes wild and unhinged. "You should be scared. We should both be scared, because if we don't get that signature from the court next week, one of us is going to have to make a sacrifice. And I am the one with the debt, but you are the one who brought me into this family, so maybe you should be the one to help pay the bill." I watched from Paris, feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with the distance Blake had crossed the line. He was no longer just a leech. He was a cannibal. The beast had been cornered, and it was looking at its mate not as a partner, but as a meal. I reached for my phone to call Mrs. Patel. We needed to accelerate the timeline. The court hearing was no longer just a legal battle. It was a race to save my daughter from being butchered by her own husband for spare parts. The game had turned deadly, and it was time to play the next card. The feed from the closed-circuit camera in courtroom 4B was grainy and devoid of color, but the high-definition audio captured every ragged breath my son-in-law took as he stood before the bench. It was 9 in the morning in Atlanta, and while the rest of the city was rushing to work, Blake and Jasmine were rushing to steal the last thing I owned. My freedom, I sat in my suite in Paris, the remains of a room service breakfast on the table before me, watching the legal drama unfold on my laptop screen, feeling like a director watching the final act of a tragedy he had written years ago. The courtroom was sparsely populated, just the bailiff, the court reporter, and the Honorable Judge Harrison, a woman known for her no-nonsense attitude and her ability to smell a lie from the parking lot. Blake stood at the plaintiff table wearing a suit that was clearly bought yesterday, likely from a discount rack, as his bespoke wardrobe was currently being held as collateral by his various creditors. Beside him stood his lawyer, a man named Mr. Kane, whose billboard I had seen many times on the highway, usually advertising quick settlements for slip-and-fall accidents. He was not a constitutional scholar. He was a shark in a cheap polyester suit, and today he looked hungry. "Your Honor," Mr. Kane began, his voice oily and rehearsed, "we are here today to file an emergency petition for temporary guardianship over the person and estate of Mr. Morgan Mitchell. My client, Mr. Blake Henderson, and his wife, Mrs. Jasmine Henderson, are deeply concerned for the safety and well-being of their father." Judge Harrison looked over her spectacles at the paperwork, shuffling the files with a skepticism that warmed my heart. "Emergency guardianship is a serious measure, Mr. Kane," the judge said, her voice dry, usually reserved for individuals who are comatose or severely incapacitated. "I see here that Mr. Mitchell is not present." "That is exactly the point, Your Honor," Kane said, gesturing dramatically to the empty defense table. "Mr. Mitchell has disappeared. He has abandoned his home, his pets, and his family, without a word. We have reason to believe he is suffering from a rapid onset of dementia, possibly Alzheimer's disease. He is confused, disoriented, and vulnerable. He has locked his family out of his accounts, not out of malice, but out of confusion. He likely does not even know where he is right now if we do not grant guardianship to his children, so they can access his funds and hire private investigators to find him. He could die out there alone and confused." I took a sip of my espresso, marveling at the narrative they had constructed. They were painting me as a lost, senile old man wandering the streets in a bathrobe, while they, the loving children, were desperate to save me. It was a compelling story. If you ignored the fact that I was currently designing a new hydraulic valve system on my iPad while wearing a silk robe. "Do you have medical evidence of this diagnosis?" Judge Harrison asked, leaning forward. "We have the testimony of those who lived with him," Kane said smoothly. "We have his daughter Jasmine." Stood up. She looked terrible. The stress of the last week, the arrest, the night in jail, and the looming threat of the loan sharks had stripped away her vanity. She wore a simple gray dress and no makeup, trying to look like the grieving, concerned daughter. She walked to the witness stand and took the oath, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help her God. I watched her hand rest on the Bible, the same hand that had swiped a stolen credit card 2 days ago, and I wondered if the book burned her touch. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said kindly, "please tell the court why you believe your father is incompetent." Jasmine took a deep, shaky breath and looked directly at the judge, tears filling her eyes on cue. "My father has been declining for months, Your Honor," Jasmine said, her voice trembling. "It started with small things, forgetting where he put his keys, forgetting names, but then it got dangerous last week. He left the gas stove on, he almost burned the house down. We came home, and the kitchen was full of smoke. He was just sitting there staring at the wall. He didn't even realize the danger. When I asked him about it, he screamed at me. He didn't know who I was. He called me Coretta. That is my mother's name. She died 10 years ago." I stared at the screen, my hand freezing around the coffee cup. That was the lie, the specific, detailed lie that broke the last thread of attachment I had to her. I remembered the kitchen incident vividly. It was 3 years ago, not last week. And it was Jasmine who had come over drunk after a fight with Blake and tried to cook an omelet. She had passed out on the sofa and the pan had caught fire. I was the one who put it out. I was the one who carried her to bed and cleaned up the mess so Blake wouldn't know she had relapsed into drinking, and now she was twisting that memory of my protection into a weapon to declare me insane. "He is not safe, Your Honor," Jasmine continued, wiping a tear. "He has millions of dollars in assets, but he lives like a pauper. He hides money in the walls. He thinks the government is spying on him. He needs us to take care of him. Please, grant us guardianship so we can freeze his assets before he gives them all away to some scammer or loses them in his confusion." Blake nodded solemnly from the table, playing the part of the supportive husband, perfectly watching them. I realized that they actually believed their own lies. They had convinced themselves that I was the problem, that my refusal to fund their lifestyle was a symptom of mental illness rather than a rational decision. Judge Harrison looked thoughtful. She scribbled some notes on her pad, looking from Jasmine to the empty defense table. The silence in the courtroom stretched out heavy and suffocating. Seeing the judge hesitate gave Blake hope. I saw him sit up straighter. I saw the gleam of victory in his eyes. He was doing the math again, calculating how fast he could liquidate my patent once the gavel came down. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. You may step down," the judge said. Jasmine walked back to her seat, squeezing Blake's hand under the table. "Your Honor," Mr. Kane said, standing up again, "given the testimony and the urgent nature of the situation and the fact that there is no opposition present, we ask that you sign the order immediately. Time is of the essence." The judge picked up her gavel, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Even with all my planning, there was always a variable I could not control, the human element of a sympathetic judge. She opened her mouth to rule, but before she could speak, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud. "Objection, Your Honor!" A voice rang out clear and authoritative. Every head in the room turned. Blake spun around so fast he nearly fell out of his chair. Jasmine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Walking down the center aisle was not me, but someone far more terrifying to a guilty man. Mrs. Patel, my attorney, walked with the stride of a predator entering a field of grazing sheep. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, pulling a rolling briefcase behind her like a weapon of war. "And who are you?" the judge asked, lowering her gavel. "I am Priya Patel, representing Mr. Morgan Mitchell," Mrs. Patel said, stopping at the defense table and placing her briefcase on it with a heavy thud. "And I am here to oppose this motion and to file a counter-motion for sanctions against the plaintiffs for perjury and filing a frivolous lawsuit." Blake's lawyer. Mr. Kane sputtered, his face turning red. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mr. Mitchell is missing. He is incompetent. He cannot hire a lawyer." "On the contrary," Mrs. Patel said calmly, opening her briefcase and pulling out a laptop. "Mr. Mitchell is very much found, and he is far more competent than anyone in this room." She turned the laptop around facing the judge and connected it to the court as display system. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs claim Mr. Mitchell has dementia, that he is confused and unable to manage his affairs. Let me present Exhibit A." On the large screen behind the judge, a video began to play. It was dated yesterday, time-stamped and verified. It showed me sitting in a conference room in Paris presenting a technical schematic to a group of German automotive engineers. I was speaking fluent French, explaining the intricacies of a new kinetic energy recovery system, answering complex mathematical questions without looking at any notes. "This video was recorded 18 hours ago," Mrs. Patel said, narrating the scene. "Mr. Mitchell is currently the lead consultant on a $20 million green energy project in Europe. As you can see, he is articulate, sharp, and fully in command of his faculties. He is not wandering the streets, confused. He is working at a level of intellectual capacity that his accusers could not comprehend in their best days." Jasmine stared at the screen, her mouth hanging open. Seeing me looking powerful, seeing me respected by these foreign executives shattered her image of the confused old man she had tried to sell to the court. Furthermore, Mrs. Patel continued, pulling a stack of documents from her bag. "Here is a sworn affidavit from Dr. Jean-Luc Dubois, a leading neurologist in Paris, dated this morning, certifying that Mr. Mitchell scores in the 99th percentile for cognitive function for his age group. And here is the Fire Marshal's report from 3 years ago regarding the kitchen fire." Mrs. Henderson mentioned, proving that Mr. Mitchell was not even in the house when the fire started, but arrived later to extinguish it, proving that her testimony today was a fabrication. The judge's face hardened. She looked at the documents. Then she looked at Jasmine with a gaze that could peel paint. "Mrs. Henderson," Judge Harrison said, her voice dangerously low. "Is this true? Did you lie to this court about the timeline of the fire?" Jasmine stammered, looking at Blake for help, but Blake was staring at the table, trying to make himself invisible. I might have been confused about the dates, Your Honor. I was just so worried." "You were worried about the money," the judge snapped, cutting her off. Mrs. Patel stepped forward, delivering the final blow. "Your Honor, my client has left the country to escape the harassment and financial abuse of his daughter and son-in-law. They are attempting to use this court as a weapon to seize assets to pay off illegal gambling debts." My client asks that this case be dismissed with prejudice and that a restraining order be issued immediately. Judge Harrison did not hesitate. She slammed her gavel down and the sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Petition denied, she boomed. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Kane, I will be reporting you to the Bar Association for bringing this nonsense into my courtroom without due diligence, and you too, she pointed the gavel at Blake and Jasmine. If you ever step foot in this court again with a frivolous claim, I will hold you in contempt and put you in a cell, so fast your heads will spin. Get out of my sight. Blake collapsed back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. The air left his lungs in a rush, and he looked physically ill. The lifeline he had been counting on, the legal magic wand that was supposed to save him from the sharks, had just been snapped in half by a 5-foot-tall woman in a navy suit. Mrs. Patel packed up her laptop calmly, ignoring the chaos. She walked over to the plaintiff table where Blake was sitting with his head in his hands. She leaned down close to his ear, so close that the microphone on the table picked up her whisper. Clearly for me to hear in Paris. Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Patel, whispered her voice sweet and deadly. I spoke to Morgan this morning. He wanted me to convey a message. He said he hopes you are fond of your pinky finger, because without the guardianship, the interest rate just went up to 100%. Blake flinched violently, looking up at her with wide, terrified eyes, looking for mercy, looking for a deal. He also said, Mrs. Patel added, straightening up and smoothing her jacket, that he hopes the lawsuit was worth the court fees because he is countersuing you for the legal costs of my appearance today. Have a nice day. She walked out of the courtroom, her heels clicking a rhythm of victory on the marble floor, leaving Blake and Jasmine alone in the wreckage of their scheme. I closed my laptop in Paris, letting out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The legal battle was won. But the war was far from over. Keeping the money away from them was the easy part. Watching what they would do. Now that the walls were closing in was the hard part. Desperation makes people dangerous. And Blake was no longer just a greedy man, he was a cornered rat. And rats will bite anything to survive, even their own kind. The courtroom had been civilized, but what was coming next would be primal. The divide and conquer strategy is as old as warfare itself. But I was not fighting a war against an army, I was fighting a war against two narcissists who were currently sharing a roof and a looming death sentence after the disaster in the courtroom. The cracks in the alliance between Jasmine and Blake were not just visible, they were gaping wide open. I sat in my hotel room in Paris, enjoying a plate of coq au vin, watching the sun set over the Seine, knowing that in Atlanta, the sun had set on their marriage a long time ago. It was time to make sure they knew it too. I picked up my burner phone, the one number Jasmine did not have blocked, and dialed her cell. I timed it perfectly, knowing Blake had gone to a dive bar to drink away the humiliation of the judge's ruling, leaving Jasmine alone in the house that smelled of fear and broken glass. She answered on the first ring, her voice a whisper of desperation. Hello? Who is this? It is your father, Jasmine, I said calmly, taking a sip of red wine. Do not hang up. Do not scream. Just listen, because I am the only person left on this earth who can stop Silas from coming back on. Friday. Dad, she breathed, and I could hear the tears instantly surfacing. Oh God, Dad, please, you have to help us. The judge dismissed the case. Blake is going crazy. He is talking about selling my organs. Dad, please, I am scared. I know you are scared, baby girl, I said, using the nickname I hadn't used since she was 12. I know everything. I know about the debt. I know it is $600,000, and I know exactly how it happened. It wasn't a bad investment, was it, Jasmine? It was online poker and sports betting. Blake gambled away your future while you were busy buying shoes. There was a silence on the line, then a sob. He told me it was crypto, she cried. He told me it was a sure thing. He lost it all, Dad. He lost everything. He didn't just lose it, Jasmine. He stole it. I said, my voice hardening. He stole my car. He forged my signature on checks, and he manipulated you into becoming an accomplice. But here's the thing, Jasmine. I don't blame you. I know my daughter. I know you were raised better than this. I know you were dragged down by a man who saw you as a meal ticket, not a wife. Yes, Jasmine cried eagerly, latching onto the lifeline I threw her. Yes, that is exactly it, Dad. He forced me. He made me do it. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. I leaned back in my chair knowing she was lying, knowing she was just as greedy as he was. but for this plan to work, I needed her to believe I was on her side. I am going to make you an offer. Jasmine, I said, but this offer is for you and you alone. It is not for Blake. What do you mean? She asked, sniffing. I mean, I have the money, Jasmine. I have always had the money. I could wire $700,000 right now and make Silas disappear forever. I could pay off the debt. I could buy you a new house. I could make sure you never have to work a day in your life. Oh, Dad, please, she begged. Do it. Please do it. I will, I said, but not for him. I will not pay a single dime to save Blake Henderson. He dug his grave and he can lie in it, but you are a Mitchell, but you. And Mitchells look out for their own. So here's the deal. I pay off the debt, but only if you divorce him, and only if you give me something in return. Anything, she said, instantly. Anything. Dad, I need proof. Jasmine, I need the digital files, the scanned images of my signature that Blake used to forge the car title and the checks. I need the emails where he set up the gambling accounts. In my name, I need hard evidence that sends him to prison for 20 years so he can never hurt you again. Jasmine hesitated for less than a second, a heartbeat of loyalty that flickered and died before it could even take a breath. He keeps them on his laptop, she whispered. He has a hidden folder called insurance. He scans everything, Dad. He keeps records of every crime he commits just in case he needs leverage later. Get them, I said, cold and commanding. Go into his office, right now. Copy the folder onto a drive and email it to me. Do that, and the wire transfer happens tonight. Do that and you are free. I am going now, she said. I am going right now. Dad, just please don't hang up. I stayed on the line listening as she ran through the house. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, fast and frantic. I heard the door to Blake's office creak open. Hearing her betray her husband so easily gave me no pleasure, only a deep, confirming sadness that I had raised a survivor who would eat her own young to stay alive. I am at his desk, Jasmine whispered, her breathing ragged, knowing Blake could come home any minute. I am turning on the computer. Do you know the password? Of course I know the password, she hissed. It is Moneymaker 1, 2, 3. He is such an idiot. I heard the startup chime of the computer. I heard the click of the mouse, frantic and loud in the quiet house. I found it, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Oh my God. Dad, it is all here. He has scans of your passport. He has the template for your signature. He even has a list of credit cards he opened in your name that I didn't even know about. Send it all. I said send it. And you are safe. I heard the typing of keys, seeing the progress bar in my mind, watching the data transfer across the ocean. She was selling him out, not for justice, but for survival, and in that moment she was more dangerous than Silas ever could be. Almost done, she whispered, 90%. Come on, come on. Suddenly, I heard a noise in the background, the sound of a front door slamming shut downstairs, the heavy tread of boots on the stairs. He is home, Jasmine gasped, panic rising in her voice. Dad, he is home. Finish the transfer, I commanded. Do not stop, Jasmine, I heard Blake's voice slurring slightly from the hallway. Jasmine, where are you? I brought whiskey. We need to drink. We need to figure out which kidney you are going to sell. He was drunk and mean. I am in the office, Blake, Jasmine yelled, trying to sound casual, just checking emails. The footsteps stopped, then they started again, faster, heavier, moving toward the room. Checking emails. Blake's voice boomed closer now on my computer. Why? Are you on my computer, Jasmine? I heard the door to the office fly open, banging against the wall. What are you doing? Blake roared, his voice distorting over the phone connection. I am just looking for a solution, Jasmine stammered, her voice high and terrified. Dad is on the phone. Blake, he's going to help us. Give me that phone, Blake yelled. I heard a scuffle, the sound of the phone being dropped but not hung up. It landed on the carpet, muffled but still transmitting the chaos. You are stealing my files, Blake screamed. I see the screen. Jasmine, you are copying the insurance folder. Who are you sending it to? Are you sending it to the cops? I am sending it to Dad. Jasmine shrieked, her voice filled with a venomous hate. I am sending it to Dad, so he will pay the debt, he promised Blake. He promised to save me if I gave him the proof. Save you, Blake laughed, a sound of pure insanity. You think he is going to save you? He hates you, Jasmine. He hates us both, you stupid woman. You just handed him the nails for my coffin. He is going to pay. Silas, Jasmine yelled. Let me go, Blake. Let me finish the upload. I heard the sound of a slap, distinct and brutal, followed by the sound of a body hitting the desk, things crashing to the floor, a lamp, shattering papers sliding. You traitor! Blake screamed, and I could hear the violence in his movements, the sound of him grabbing her, dragging her away from the keyboard. You think you can sell me out? I am your husband. I am the father of your child. You are a loser! Jasmine screamed back, and I heard the sound of her nails raking across his face, a primal, animalistic sound. Get off me, Blake. Get off me. I listened to the struggle, the grunts of exertion, the tearing of fabric. They were fighting like wild dogs in the ruins of their ambition, tearing each other apart just as I knew they would. The love they professed to have was nothing but a mutual pact of greed. And now that the money was gone, the pact was broken. The phone must have been kicked because the sound spun dizzily for a moment before settling again. I got it. Blake panted, and I heard the click of the mouse canceling the transfer. No one gets this, Jasmine. No one. You idiot, she sobbed. He was going to pay. He was going to save me. He was going to put me in jail. Blake spat, and I could hear him leaning over her, breathing hard. He was going to lock me up and leave you with the money. Well, guess what, Jasmine? If I go down, we go down together. Nobody leaves this house. Nobody gets a payout. Dad? Jasmine screamed at the phone. Dad, help me. He is crazy. I sat in my hotel room listening to the line. Go dead. Blake had crushed the phone under his heel, ending the call, but not before I had heard enough. I did not have the files yet, but I had something better. I had the recording of the call. I had the recording of Jasmine, admitting she knew about the crimes of her agreeing to trade evidence for money, and of Blake admitting the files existed and that he was willing to hurt her to keep them hid. I saved the audio. File on my laptop and took another sip of wine. The upload might have failed, but the trap had sprung. They were no longer conspirators. They were enemies locked in a cage together, knowing that only one of them could survive the night. I picked up the landline in the hotel room and dialed a number. Not the police. Not yet. I dialed the number for Silas. This is a private number, a voice answered, gruff on the other end. This is Morgan Mitchell, I said, my voice steady. Tell Silas that the deal has changed. Tell him that if he wants his money, he needs to go to the house tonight because my son-in-law is currently destroying the only collateral he has left. I hung up the phone and looked out at the lights of the Eiffel Tower. The double betrayal was complete. Jasmine had betrayed Blake. Blake had betrayed Jasmine, and I had betrayed them both by telling them I would save them, when in reality, I was just lighting the match that would burn the whole house down. The sharks were on their way, and this time, there would be no negotiation. The disintegration of a marriage is usually a slow erosion, like rust eating away at the undercarriage of a truck until the frame snaps. But watching the feed from inside my former home, I witnessed a collapse that was sudden and violent, like a piston firing through an engine block. Blake had crossed the line from desperate to feral. The man who once bragged about his tailored suits and his taste in wine was now using a roll of gray duct tape to bind the wrists of the woman he had vowed to protect. Jasmine sat on the floor of the bedroom, her mascara smeared across her face in jagged lines, her eyes wide with a terror that finally made her look like my daughter again, instead of a stranger. She was not screaming anymore. She had learned in the last 10 minutes that screaming only made him hit harder, and Blake was done with words. I sat in the driver's seat of a black sedan parked 3 houses down under the shadow of a large oak tree. The engine was off the windows. We're up, and the interior was dark, save for the glow of my laptop screen. I had flown back from Paris 12 hours ago, entering the country under a private charter to avoid alerting their digital tripwires. I needed to be here for the finale because while I could pull the strings from Europe, some things require the hands-on touch of a master mechanic. On the screen, Blake was raiding Jasmine's jewelry box. He dumped the contents onto the bed with a chaotic clatter. Gold chains, diamond earrings, and silver bracelets spilled out like pirate treasure among them. I saw the pearl necklace Coretta had worn on our wedding day, the one thing I had allowed Jasmine to keep because she swore she would cherish it. Seeing Blake stuff it into his pocket like it was cheap costume jewelry made my hands tighten on the steering wheel until the leather groaned. "You cannot leave me here," Jasmine whimpered, her voice muffled by the tape he had slapped over her mouth earlier. Seeing the fear in her eyes, I felt a flicker of the fatherly instinct I thought I had killed. but I suffocated it quickly. Jasmine had sold me out for money, Blake was stealing for money. They were two sides of the same counterfeit coin, and tonight the currency was pain. "I am not leaving you," Blake muttered, his eyes manic and darting around the room. "I am liquidating our assets, Jasmine. I am taking what is owed to me for putting up with your nagging and your father as insanity for 5 years. This jewelry is my severance package." He grabbed her car keys from the nightstand, the keys to the white SUV I had bought for her, safe, reliable, and loaded with safety features, because I wanted my grandchildren to be secure. Now it was just a getaway vehicle for a thief. "Don't to worry," Blake said, leaning down to whisper in her ear, his breath fogging up the camera lens on the dresser. "I will call the cops from a payphone in a few hours. Maybe they will get here before you dehydrate, or maybe Silas will get here first. Either way, I will be long gone." He grabbed his duffel bag, zipped it up with a sharp sound, and marched out of the room, leaving his pregnant wife tied to the radiator, the same radiator where she used to warm her socks on winter mornings when she was a child. I watched him leave the house. On the external cameras, he moved with a hunched, frantic energy, scanning the street but missing my car entirely in the darkness. He threw the bag into the SUV, jumped in, and started the engine. He did not look back at the house. He did not look back at the woman he was abandoning. He just slammed the car into gear and peeled away from the curb, tires screeching in the quiet suburban night. I waited 5 seconds, counting them down in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I started my car and followed him. I did not turn on my headlights. I kept my distance, letting his taillights guide me. Blake was heading for the interstate, heading south toward Florida, thinking he could outrun his debt, thinking he could vanish into the humid swamps of the coast, but he forgot one crucial detail. He was driving a machine, and machines answer to the laws of physics and the men who build them. I merged onto the highway. 3 cars behind him. Blake was speeding, weaving in and out of the light traffic, doing 80 in a 55 zone. He felt invincible in that steel cage. He thought the horsepower was his freedom, but he did not know that. 3 years ago, when I bought that car, I had installed a custom telematics control unit. It was a prototype I was testing for a defense contractor, a system designed to allow law enforcement to disable a vehicle remotely without a high-speed chase. I had never removed it, because deep down I always knew a day might come when I needed to stop that car from going somewhere it shouldn't. I instructed my laptop to run the override sequence. The program was simple, elegant, and terrifyingly effective. It bypassed the driver's inputs and took control of the electronic control unit, effectively becoming the brain of the car. Blake was hitting 90 miles per hour. Now the city lights fading behind him, replaced by the dark stretches of pine forest that line the highway out of Atlanta. He was probably already calculating how much he would get for the pearls, probably already planning his new life. I pressed the enter key. On the screen, I saw the telemetry data form the SUV shift. Instantly, the throttle position sensor commanded 0%, regardless of how hard Blake pressed the gas pedal. The fuel injectors cut off the flow of gasoline, starving the engine. The transmission shifted into neutral, disengaging the power from the wheels. Ahead of me, I saw the SUV's brake lights flare red. As Blake realized something was wrong, he pumped the gas. I could see the car jerking slightly as he panicked, but the engine was dying a slow mechanical death. The car began to coast, losing momentum, stripping away his speed and his power. Then I activated the second phase, the steering lock assist. Usually this feature stiffens the steering at high speeds for stability. I reversed the polarity, making the steering wheel incredibly heavy, almost impossible to turn without immense strength. Blake swerved slightly, struggling to keep the car in the lane. His escape vehicle had turned into a 2-ton brick. I guided him remotely, watching his speed drop 80, 70, 60. I didn't want him to crash. I wanted him stranded. I steered him toward a long, empty stretch of road that ran parallel to the old CSX rail line, a place where the cell reception was spotty and the shadows were long. The SUV rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder, the engine sputtering once before dying completely. The electrical system went next, the dashboard lights flickering and dying, plunging him into total darkness inside the cabin. The power door locks engaged with a loud clunk, sealing him inside. I pulled my car onto the shoulder 100 yards behind him, leaving my lights off. I watched through binoculars as Blake pounded on the window, screaming silently into the night. He tried the door handle. It wouldn't budge. He tried to restart the car, but the starter motor had been disabled. He was trapped in a coffin of glass and steel, wearing a stolen suit and carrying a bag of stolen jewels. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his terrified face. He tried to dial, but I had engaged the signal jammer in my trunk, a small device that created a bubble of electronic silence around us. No calls, no texts, no internet. He was alone with me. I picked up my own phone, which was hardwired into the satellite system, bypassing the jammer, and dialed 911, emergency services. "What is your emergency?" the operator asked. "I would like to report a domestic disturbance and a grand theft auto in progress," I said, my voice calm and detached. "I am following the suspect vehicle, a white SUV. He is currently stalled on Highway 29 mile marker 42. The suspect is armed and dangerous. He has assaulted his wife and left her bound in their home. Please send units to the residence as well. The victim is pregnant and needs immediate medical attention." I gave them the address and hung up. I watched Blake for 10 minutes. He stopped pounding on the glass, eventually realizing the futility of it. He sat there slumping over the steering wheel, defeated by a ghost in the machine. He didn't know I was there watching him. He didn't know I was the one holding the key. Blue lights appeared in the distance, reflecting off the wet pavement. First one cruiser, then two, then three. They boxed him in, sirens wailing, cutting through the silence of the night. Officers spilled out, guns drawn, shouting commands that Blake couldn't hear through the soundproof glass until I remotely rolled down his window. Halfway. "Driver, put your hands where we can see them. Step out of the vehicle." Blake scrambled to comply, shoving his hands out the window, crying hysterically, "Donta, shoot, don't shoot." The car broke down. It just died. They dragged him out of the car, throwing him onto the gravel, cuffing him roughly. The duffel bag was recovered, the jewelry spilling out onto the road under the harsh glare of the police spotlights. Seeing Coretta S. pearls lying on the asphalt made me wince, but seeing Blake Henderson face down in the dirt, sobbing like a child, made it worth it. He screamed as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, yelling about a conspiracy, yelling that the car was possessed, yelling that his father-in-law was a witch, but they didn't listen to him. They never listened to the rantings of a man caught with stolen goods and a history of debt. I waited until the tow truck arrived and took the SUV away, until the last police cruiser faded into the distance. Only then did I turn my car around and head back toward the house. The scene at the house was chaotic, in a different way. An ambulance was parked in the driveway, its lights flashing rhythmically against the broken front window. Neighbors were standing on their lawns in bathrobes, whispering and pointing. I parked down the street again and walked up just close enough to see without being seen. Two paramedics were bringing Jasmine out on a stretcher. She was not physically injured beyond the bruises on her wrists and the cut on her lip, but she was playing the part of the survivor to the hilt. She had the oxygen mask around her neck and was clutching the blanket with theatrical fragility. A police officer was walking beside her, taking her statement. "He tied me up." "Officer?" Jasmine sobbed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He stole everything, my mother S. Jewelry, my car. He was going to leave me there to die. He went crazy. You are safe now." "Ma. Am," the officer said gently. "We caught him on the highway. He is in custody. You don't have to worry about him anymore." Jasmine looked up at the night sky and a strange expression crossed her face. It wasn't relief and it wasn't sorrow. It was a smile, a small, twisted smile of triumph. She looked around, expecting to see me, expecting her savior to emerge from the shadows. "I knew it," she whispered to the officer. "I knew my dad would stop him. My dad has eyes everywhere. He protected me. He set this whole thing up to catch Blake. He did this for me." The officer looked confused. "Your father." "Ma. And we received an anonymous tip." "It was him," Jasmine said, her voice gaining strength and delusion. "He is coming back now. He got rid of the bad guy and now he is coming back to take care of me and the baby. We won. Blake is gone and now everything goes back to normal." I stood in the shadows of the oak tree, listening to her rewrite history in real time. She truly believed that this was a rescue mission. She believed that by betraying Blake, she had earned her way back into my good graces. She thought that because I had punished her husband, I had forgiven her daughter. She was wrong. I watched them load her into the ambulance. She looked like a queen on a litter, waving weakly to the neighbors, basking in the attention. She convinced herself that the slate was wiped clean, that the debt was paid, and that tomorrow morning she would wake up in my house with my credit cards and my protection. She did not know that the house she was leaving would be boarded up by the bank in 48 hours. She did not know that the jewelry Blake stole was now evidence in a criminal trial and would be held for months. She did not know that I had already filed the paperwork to sever all legal ties. As the ambulance drove away, sirens wailing softly into the night, I turned and walked back to my car. The night of destiny was over. Blake was in a cage, and Jasmine was in a fantasy world, but reality was waiting for her just around the corner, and reality is a much harsher teacher than I could ever be. I started the engine and drove toward the airport. My work here was done, but the lesson was just beginning. The hospital room was quiet, but Jasmine was not resting. She was working. She sat up in the bed, adjusting the ring light she had clamped to the bedside table, checking her reflection in her phone screen. She applied a touch of concealer, not to hide the bruises, but to highlight them, to make sure the camera caught the exact shade of purple on her wrist. She was preparing for the performance of a lifetime. Because while Blake was in a physical prison, Jasmine was trying to escape the prison of public opinion. She knew that in the world of social media, victimhood is a currency, and she was about to cash out. I sat in a private booth at the airport lounge, waiting for my connecting flight to Atlanta, watching her live notification pop up on my screen. My daughter was predictable. She could not survive without validation. She needed the dopamine hit of strangers telling her she was beautiful and brave. She needed to control the narrative before the police report went public. "Hey guys," Jasmine whispered into the camera, her voice raspy and practiced tears already shimmering in her eyes. "Welcome back to the channel. I know I have been gone for a few days, but something terrible happened." I watched the viewer count climb rapidly. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people tuning in to see the train wreck. She looked into the lens with the soulful gaze of a wounded deer. "My husband, Blake," she continued, wiping a tear with a trembling hand. "He tried to kill me, guys. He was a monster hiding in plain sight. He gambled away our money. He stole my car, and when I tried to stop him, he tied me up and left me for dead." The chat stream on the side of the screen exploded with sympathy. Hearts and crying emojis flooded the feed. "Poor Jasmine. Stay strong, Queen. We love you, Jasmine. He stole my mother's jewelry," she sobbed, holding up her bare neck. "He took the only thing I had left of her and my father. My own father abandoned me right before it happened. He knew Blake was dangerous, but he just left the country. He took his millions and ran away, leaving his pregnant daughter to face a madman alone." I took a sip of black coffee, feeling the bitterness on my tongue. She was good. I had to give her that. She was weaving a tapestry of lies so tight that the light of truth could barely get through. She was painting herself as the martyr and me as the negligent villain. She was using the sympathy of strangers to rebuild her brand, to launch a GoFundMe campaign that was already linked in her bio titled, "Help Jasmine Start Over." But she forgot one thing. The internet is not a courtroom. It does not require a judge or a jury. It only requires evidence. And unlike a courtroom where evidence must be submitted and reviewed on the internet, evidence hits like a bomb instantly and without mercy. I opened a second window on my laptop. I had logged into a burner account, a profile with 0 followers and a generic picture. I had named it simply, The Truth Keeper. I had the files ready, the video clips from the security cameras, the audio recordings of her phone calls, and the emails she had sent selling out her husband. I waited until her viewership peaked, until she was in the middle of a monologue about how she had always been the financial provider and how she had tried so hard to save Blake from himself. I worked 3 jobs to support his dreams. Jasmine lied, looking earnestly into the camera. I sacrificed everything for him and he repaid me with violence. I pressed enter. I did not post a comment. I posted a link to a video hosted on a secure server in the comments section. I typed a single sentence. "Jasmine, why, Don? Do you tell them about the $600,000? The comment was initially buried under the wave of hearts, but then I used a bot network I had rented for this exact purpose to upvote the comment within seconds. It was pinned to the top of the chat, visible to everyone. "What is this?" Jasmine asked, squinting at the screen. Seeing the link, someone is spamming a link, guys. Don, T. Click it. It is probably a virus. But people are curious by nature, especially when tragedy is involved. I saw the viewer count on her stream dip slightly as people clicked the link. Then the chat began to change. The first comment appeared in all caps. "Liar." Then another "wait, is that her voice in the video?" Then a flood. "Oh my God, she is demanding money. She is threatening her dad." I watched Jasmine's face change. She saw the shift. She saw the hearts turn into angry faces. She saw the word exposed appearing over and over again. Guys, Trolls are attacking the chat, she said, her voice rising in panic. Mods, please ban anyone posting links. They are just haters trying to kick me while I am down. But I was not done. I posted the second link, the audio recording of her phone call with me, the one where she offered to sell Blake's secrets for a payout. I typed another comment. Tell them how you offered to send your husband to jail if I wired you cash. Tell them how you called your unborn child a bargaining chip. Jasmine's hands started to shake. She tried to ignore the comments, but they were moving too fast now. A wall of text accusing her of fraud, accusing her of being a sociopath. I posted the third link. The video of her screaming at me in the kitchen, calling me a grease monkey and mocking her mother's death. The chat went nuclear. You are a monster, one user wrote. I just watched the video. She is not a victim. She is the villain. Another typed. Jasmine started banning people, tapping furiously on her screen, her mask slipping, revealing the snarl beneath. Stop it, she screamed at the phone. Stop clicking the links. It is fake, deep fake. My dad made it with AI. He is trying to frame me. But the internet knows the difference between AI and the raw, ugly sound of genuine greed. Seeing her lose control confirmed everything the sponsors were watching too. A notification popped up on her screen, visible to the audience because she was screen sharing to show donation alerts. It was an email from her biggest sponsor, a detox tea company. Dear Jasmine, due to recent allegations and disturbing footage that has come to light, we are terminating our partnership. Effective immediately. Please remove all branded content from your page or face legal action. Jasmine gasped, staring at the notification, seeing her income evaporate in real time. $5,000 a month gone in a second. Then another notification from the clothing brand she was wearing in the hospital bed. Contract voided. Morality clause violation. No, 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 Jasmine yelled, forgetting the act, forgetting the soft voice and the tears. She glared into the camera, her eyes wild with rage. You cannot do this to me. I am the victim here. I am the one who was tied up. I typed one final comment into the chat. You were tied up by the monster you created. You are not a victim, Jasmine. You are an accomplice who got caught. Jasmine read the comment and she knew who it was. She looked directly into the camera lens, and for a second, I felt like she was looking right at me across the miles. Dad, she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. I know this is you. Stop it. Stop ruining my life. You have enough money. Why do you have to take my followers too? The chat exploded again. Her dad is watching. She just admitted it is real. She is yelling at her dad who saved her. Cancel her. The hashtag cancel. Jasmine began to trend on Twitter within minutes. I watched the number of her followers drop. It was like watching a dam break first, a few hundred, then thousands. The number plummeting as people unsubscribed in disgust. They were not just leaving, they were reporting her account for fraud, for harassment, for hate speech. I hate you, Jasmine shrieked at the camera, losing all composure, grabbing the ring light and throwing it across the room. The light crashed against the wall, casting wild shadows over her distorted face. I hate all of you. You are just jealous. You are all losers living in your parents' basements. I don't need you. I don't need anyone. She was showing her true face now, the face I had seen for years, the face of entitlement and rage. She was insulting the very people who paid her bills, burning the bridge while she was still standing on it. The stream cut off abruptly, likely because she threw the phone or because the platform banned her mid-broadcast, but the damage was done. The screen went black. But the comments kept rolling, scrolling into infinity, a digital tombstone for her career. I sat back in the booth and closed the laptop. The silence in the airport lounge was a stark contrast to the noise of the last 10 minutes around me. People were walking, talking, living their lives, unaware that a digital execution had just taken place. Jasmine had lost her husband. She had lost her inheritance, and now she had lost her audience. She was a woman who lived for attention. And I had just ensured that the only attention she would ever get from now on would be scorn. She was officially bankrupt, not just financially, but socially. She was radioactive. I checked the time. My flight was boarding in 20 minutes. I stood up and gathered my things. I felt a lightness in my step, a burden lifted. Jasmine would try to spin this, she would try to come back. But the internet never forgets. Those videos would follow her forever, every time she applied for a job, every time she tried to date, every time she met someone new. A simple Google search would reveal the truth. I walked toward the gate, ready to go home, ready to face the physical cleanup of my house. Now that the digital cleanup was complete, I had stripped her of her weapons and left her naked in the arena, knowing that for a narcissist, anonymity is a fate worse than death. The house was silent when I unlocked the front door for the last time. The air inside was stale, carrying the faint metallic scent of the violence that had occurred here just 2 nights ago. I walked through the hallway, stepping over the scratch marks on the hardwood floor where the entertainment center had been dragged away, seeing the ghosts of my life in every corner. I did not turn on the lights. I did not need to. I knew this house by heart. I knew which floorboards creaked and which windows rattled in the wind, but today, the house felt different. It felt like a shell, like a body after the soul has left. It was no longer a home. It was just a structure of wood and brick waiting for its next chapter. I went to the kitchen and placed a grocery bag on the counter. Inside were simple ingredients: eggs, bread, butter, and coffee. The basics of life, the basics of the breakfasts I had made for Jasmine every Sunday morning for 20 years. I took off my coat and rolled up my sleeves, revealing the watch I had reclaimed from the safety deposit box. The ticking of the second hand was the only sound in the room, counting down the minutes to the end of an era. 10 minutes later, I heard the key turn in the lock. Jasmine still had her key. I had not changed the locks because I wanted her to come in. I wanted her to feel safe one last time, before the reality of the world crashed down on her. She walked into the kitchen and stopped. She looked terrible. Her hair was matted, her designer clothes were wrinkled and stained, and her face was gaunt. The makeup she had worn for her livestream had been washed away by tears, leaving her looking young and vulnerable. She looked like the little girl who used to scrape her knees and run to me for a bandage, but I forced myself to remember that this was the same woman who had tried to sell my freedom for a wire transfer. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. She dropped her purse on the floor and ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist, burying her face in my chest. She smelled of stale perfume and desperation. "I am so sorry, Dad," she sobbed, her body shaking against mine. "I am so sorry for everything. Blake made me do it. He was crazy. He threatened me. I didn't mean any of those things," I said on the stream. "I was just scared. Please believe me. You are my dad. You are the only person I have left in this world." I stood there stiffly for a moment before slowly patting her back. It was a mechanical gesture, a muscle memory from a lifetime of parenting. "Shh, it is okay, Jasmine," I said, my voice low and calm. "You are safe now. He is gone." She pulled back, looking up at me with wide, hopeful eyes, seeing exactly what she wanted to see. She saw her father, the protector, the provider, the man who fixed things. She did not see the man who had orchestrated the destruction of her husband. She thought she had won. She thought that by shedding a few tears and blaming the bad man, she could erase the betrayal. "Sit down," I said gently, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. "I am making breakfast. You look like you haven't eaten." "I haven't." She sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I have been at the police station for hours, giving statements. They took my phone as evidence, Dad. I have nothing. I don't even have a way to call an Uber." I turned to the stove and lit the burner. The blue flame flared to life, heating the cast iron skillet that had belonged to Coretta. I cracked the eggs, letting them sizzle in the butter, the smell filling the kitchen, masking the scent of the past. It was a domestic scene, a scene of comfort and normalcy, and I could feel Jasmine relaxing behind me. I could feel her shoulders dropping. I could feel her exhaling the tension. "This feels like old times," she said, her voice sounding stronger, less tremulous. "Remember when Mom used to make pancakes on Saturdays, and you would burn the bacon every single time?" "I remember," I said, flipping the eggs, keeping my back to her. "I remember everything." "Jasmine," I plated the food, adding 2 slices of buttered toast and a cup of black coffee. I placed it in front of her and sat down opposite her, watching her eat. She ate hungrily, tearing at the bread, shoveling the eggs into her mouth like a starving animal. Watching her, I felt a pang of pity. She was my daughter, my flesh and blood. And seeing her this low was painful. But then she started talking, and the pity evaporated like mist in the sun. "So, what is the plan, Dad?" she asked around a mouthful of toast, her eyes brightening, regaining that spark of calculation I recognized. Well, the plan," I repeated, taking a sip of my coffee. "Yeah, for us," she said, leaning forward, the tears gone, replaced by excitement. "I was thinking about what happened, and honestly, this is a blessing in disguise. Blake was dead weight, Dad. He was dragging us down with his gambling and his bad investments. Now that he is going to prison, we are free. I asked, keeping my face neutral. "Yes, we..." She smiled, reaching out to touch my hand on the table. "You and me." Dad, the Mitchell team. Listen, I know things got messy, but now we can really focus on the future. I was looking up the value of that patent. You have the braking system, the lawyer said. It is worth millions if we sell the rights outright. Not just the royalties, but the whole thing. We could get a lump sum of maybe $10 or $15 million. I looked at her hand, touching mine, feeling the coldness of her skin. She had not asked about my health. She had not asked how I felt about losing my son-in-law. She had jumped straight to the money, straight to the liquidation of my life's work. And what would we do with $15 million, Jasmine? I asked quietly. Oh, Dad, the possibilities are endless, she gushed, her eyes shining with greed. We could buy a new place, maybe in Buckhead or even Miami. Atlanta is full of bad memories now, right? We get a big mansion with a pool and a guest house for you, obviously, and I can restart my brand. I can hire a real PR team to spin this whole story. I can write a book about surviving a toxic marriage with your money backing me. I could be huge, Dad, and we would never have to worry about bills again. She paused, looking at me, expecting me to nod, expecting me to pull out my checkbook and start writing. And I can help you manage it, she added quickly, seeing my silence. I learned a lot from watching Blake fail. I know what not to do now. I can manage the investments. I can be your financial advisor. We keep it in the family, just you and me. I looked at the half-eaten eggs on her plate. I looked at the coffee cup with her lipstick stain on the rim. She was already spending the money in her head. She was already picking out the curtains for the Miami mansion. She hadn't learned a single thing. She hadn't changed. She had just swapped one host for another. Blake was gone, so now she was trying to latch back onto me. I stood up slowly and walked over to the counter. She watched me, thinking I was getting more coffee, thinking I was mulling over her brilliant business proposal. I picked up a small brass object from the counter. It was cool and heavy in my hand. I walked back to the table and placed it gently in front of her, right next to her plate. It was the key to the house. "What is this?" she asked, looking at the key, then up at me with confusion. "Why are you giving me this? I already have a key." "That is not a spare key, Jasmine," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "That is my key. That is the master key to this house, and I am leaving it here because I don't need it anymore." She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "Oh, I get it. You are symbolically passing the torch, right? Saying it is our house. Now that is sweet, Dad." "No, Jasmine," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I am not passing the torch. I am passing the burden." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean that there is no we," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "There is no mansion in Miami, there is no PR team, and there is certainly no $15 million for you to manage." "But the patent?" she stammered. "The royalties. You said you had the money." "I do have the money," I said, "and it is safe, very safe, but it is not for you, and it is not for this house." I checked my watch. "You have exactly 10 minutes to finish that toast, Jasmine." 10 minutes for what she asked, panic starting to creep back into her voice. 10 minutes before the new owners arrive," I said. She dropped her fork. It clattered onto the plate with a loud chime. "What new owners? I sold the house." "Jasmine," I said simply, "I sold it 3 days ago to a cash buyer, a developer who wants to tear it down and build condos. The closing was rushed because I offered a significant discount for a quick sale. The paperwork is signed. The money is wired and the deed has been transferred as of 9 a.m. this morning. This house does not belong to me, and it certainly does not belong to you." "You sold my childhood home," she whispered, her face going pale. "You sold the house where Mom died." "I sold a building, Jasmine," I said, correcting her firmly. "Your mother does not live here. She lives in my memory, and you desecrated her memory when you stole from her cancer fund, and you desecrated this house when you let your husband turn it into a collateral for his gambling debts." "But where am I going to live?" she cried, standing up, knocking the chair over. "I have nowhere to go." "Dad, Blake stole my car. The bank took the other house. I have no money. I have no clothes." "I know," I said, walking toward the door, picking up my coat. "I know you have nothing, Jasmine, and that is exactly what you need right now. You have spent your entire life leaning on others. First on me, then on Blake. You have never stood on your own 2 feet. You have never earned a dollar that wasn't given or stolen." "You can't do this," she screamed, running after me, grabbing my arm. "You can't leave me on the street. I am your daughter." I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. "I am doing this because you are my daughter," I said. If I give you money now, you will never learn. You will find another. Blake, you will blow through the millions, and in 5 years you will be back here begging again. I am breaking the cycle. Jasmine. I opened the front door, the bright morning sun flooding into the hallway, blinding us both. You have 10 minutes. I repeated. The new owners are very strict about trespassing. They will call the police if they find a squatter on the premises, and given your current legal situation, I don't think you want another interaction with the police today. Dad, please, she wailed, falling to her knees in the doorway, clutching the frame. Please don't go, I won't. We'll change. I promise I will change. You have to change. I said, looking down at her, but not for me and not for money. You have to change for yourself. I walked out onto the porch, down the steps, and onto the walkway where a sleek black town car was waiting for me. The driver opened the door and I slid into the cool leather interior. I looked back one last time. Jasmine was still on her knees in the doorway, a silhouette framed by the darkness of the empty house. She was screaming something. But the soundproof glass of the car cut her off, leaving her looking like a silent movie actress, overacting a tragedy. Drive, I said to the driver. As the car pulled away, I saw a large yellow truck turning onto the street. It was a construction crew followed by a luxury SUV. The new owners were early. I watched as they pulled into the driveway, blocking Jasmine inside. I watched as a man in a hard hat got out holding a clipboard, looking at the house. Not as a home, but as a demolition project. I did not look back. Again, I settled into the seat, feeling the vibration of the road beneath me, feeling the weight of the last 30 years lifting off my shoulders. It was done. The house was gone, the money was secured, and my daughter was finally exactly where she needed to be, alone with the consequences of her actions. The meal I had cooked her was the last nourishment she would receive from my hand. From now on, she would have to learn to feed herself. The screech of air brakes shattered the morning silence, cutting through the tension on the front lawn like a knife through canvas. Jasmine wiped her eyes, looking past me, expecting to see a limousine or a luxury sedan carrying the wealthy developer I had told her about. She was expecting a man in a suit, a man with a checkbook, someone she could perhaps charm or manipulate into letting her stay for a few more days. But what stopped in front of the house was not a luxury car. It was a school bus, a long yellow diesel belching machine that looked out of place on our manicured suburban street. The doors hissed open, and for a moment Jasmine just stared, her mouth slightly open in confusion. She looked at me thinking this was some kind of sick joke, some final humiliation I had orchestrated to mock her status. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and indignation. "Why is there a school bus in my driveway?" "Dad, tell the driver to move. He is blocking the entrance for the new owners." I did not answer her. Instead, I walked toward the bus, my stride long and purposeful for the first time in days. I felt a genuine smile touching the corners of my lips. Not the cold smile of revenge, but the warm smile of legacy. The first child stepped off the bus. He was a boy, no older than 12, with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that held the sharp intelligence of a survivor. He was wearing a crisp navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants. On the pocket of the shirt was an embroidered logo, a gear interwoven with a heart and the words "The Morgan" and "The Coretta Engineering Initiative." Behind him came another child, and then another 20 boys and girls from the roughest neighborhoods of Atlanta filed out of the bus. They did not look at the house with greed. They looked at it with wonder. They looked at the oak trees and the sprawling porch, not as assets to be liquidated, but as a sanctuary. They had never known. Jasmine stepped back, her heels sinking into the grass, looking at the children as if they were an invading army. "Get them off the lawn," she hissed at me, pulling at my sleeve. "Dad, tell them to leave. This is private property. The new owner will be furious if he sees a bunch of street kids trampling the landscaping." I pulled my arm away from her grip and walked up to the first boy, the one with the sharp eyes. He was clutching a small, battered notebook to his chest. "Welcome," I said to him, extending my hand. "My name is Morgan Mitchell." The boy looked at my hand, then up at my face. He straightened his spine and shook my hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm. "I am Marcus, sir," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Are you the engineer?" "I am the engineer." I confirmed. "And this is your new workshop?" Jasmine let out a shrill laugh, a sound bordering on hysteria. She marched over to us, waving her hands at the group of children. Okay, show is over, she yelled, her voice echoing off the brick facade of the house. Listen to me, you little delinquents. This is not a playground, and it is certainly not a workshop. Get back on your bus and go back to wherever you came from, before I call the police. The children shrank back slightly, used to being yelled at by people like Jasmine, used to being told they didn't belong. But Marcus stood his ground, looking at Jasmine with a calmness that infuriated her. I turned to Jasmine, my face hardening into stone. Do not speak to them like that, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You are the one who is trespassing, Jasmine, not them. She looked at me, her eyes bulging. What are you talking about, you said. You sold the house to a developer. You said a cash buyer. I did sell the house, I said, turning to face the group of children, opening my arms to encompass them all. I sold it for $1 to the Morgan and Coretta Engineering Fund, a non-profit organization dedicated to finding brilliant minds in forgotten places and giving them the tools to build a future. Jasmine stared at me, her brain struggling to process the information. She looked at the house, then at the kids, then back at me. You gave it away, she whispered, the horror in her voice. Absolute. You gave my childhood home to a charity. I did not give it away. I corrected her. I invested it. This house is no longer a residence, Jasmine. It is a boarding school and a technology center. The garage where I restored my Mustangs will be a robotics lab. The living room where you filmed your vanity videos will be a coding center. The dining room where Blake demanded my money will be a library where these children will learn about physics and finance, two subjects you and your husband failed miserably. A black sedan pulled up behind the bus, and Mrs. Patel stepped out. She was carrying a thick leather binder and looking every bit the Iron Lady of the law. She walked up the driveway, her heels clicking on the pavement, ignoring Jasmine completely and nodding respectfully to the children. Is everything in order, Mr. Mitchell? She asked, handing me the binder. Everything is perfect, Mrs. Patel, I said, taking the documents. Jasmine lunged for the binder, trying to tear it from my hands, but I held it out of her reach. She was panting, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly greed. You can't do this, she screamed, jumping up and down like a tantruming toddler. This is illegal. You have to be mentally incompetent to give away $1 million property. I will sue you, Dad. I will sue you, and I will sue this fake charity, and I will kick every single one of these brats onto the street. Mrs. Patel adjusted her glasses and looked at Jasmine with a look of profound pity. Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Patel said, her voice cutting through Jasmine's, screaming like a gavel, strike. I would advise you to lower your voice. The transfer of this property is ironclad. It has been placed in an irrevocable trust, meaning it cannot be altered, amended, or revoked by anyone, not even Mr. Mitchell himself. And the money, Jasmine gasped, turning her wild eyes on me. The patent, the millions. You said you sold the rights. You said you had the cash. I do have the cash, I said, and I turned to the page in the binder that detailed the endowment. I held it up for her to see. The $15 million from the sale of the patent rights, along with the entirety of my pension fund and liquid savings, has been transferred into the operating account of the trust. Mrs. Patel read aloud, pointing to the figures. The funds are designated for scholarships, equipment, and room and board for the students for the next 50 years. 50 years, Jasmine shrieked, clutching her hair. 50 years. You locked the money away for 50 years. What about me, Dad? What about your family? I looked at the children standing behind me, watching this display of entitlement with wide eyes. They knew what it was like to be hungry. They knew what it was like to have nothing. And here was a woman who had been given everything, screaming because she wanted more. You are asking about family. Jasmine, I asked, stepping closer to her until I was looking down into her tear-stained face. You want to talk about blood? Yes, I am. Your blood, she cried, hitting her chest. I am your daughter. I am the only one who matters, not these strangers, not these random kids you picked up off the street. How could you choose them over me? I looked at Marcus, the boy with the notebook. I saw the hunger in his eyes, not for food, but for a chance. I saw the potential that had been stifled by poverty. I saw myself 60 years ago, a boy with a mind for machines and no way to prove it until a stranger gave me a shot. Jasmine, I said, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. Being a father is not about biology. It is not about whose DNA you share. It is about who you raise. It is about who you teach and who you protect. I pointed at the house. I raised you in this house. I gave you the best education money could buy. I gave you cars. I gave you safety. I gave you love. And what did you become? You became a woman who steals from her dying mother. You became a woman who marries a thief and helps him rob her father. You became a woman who looks at a school bus full of hopeful children and sees only obstacles to her own vanity." Jasmine sobbed, shaking her head, her denial deep and pathetic. "No, Dad, that is not fair. I made mistakes, but I am still your child." I looked at the 20 children standing in the driveway, their faces open and eager, waiting for permission to enter their new life. "These are my children now," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally free of the lie. These children have dreams, Jasmine. They have ideas. They want to build things. They want to fix the world. You and Blake only wanted to consume it. You wanted to eat the fruit of my labor without ever planting a seed. "But I am pregnant," she wailed, playing her final card. "I am carrying your grandchild, and that child will be welcome here," I said sternly. "If you ever learn to be a mother, if you ever get a job and learn the value of $1 and come back here with humility, I will help you with the baby, but I will not give you a dime. The money is gone. Jasmine, it is welded into the foundation of this trust. It is buying computers and 3D printers and textbooks. It is not buying you a mansion in Miami." Mrs. Patel stepped forward, closing the binder with a final snap. "The board of trustees for the fund is independent," she stated clearly. "No family member of Mr. Mitchell, including you. Mrs. Henderson is permitted to serve on the board or receive any financial compensation from the trust ever. It is a conflict of interest clause that your father insisted on." Jasmine stared at us, her mouth working but no sound coming out. The finality of it was crashing down on her. The millions were real, but they were locked behind a wall of legal steel that she could never breach. She wasn't just disinherited, she was replaced by a mission that was bigger than her ego. "You are crazy," she whispered, taking a step back, her eyes filled with hate. "You are a crazy old man who hates his own daughter. I hope you die alone in this house with your little street rats." I smiled, and it was the most genuine smile I had worn in years. I won to be alone. "Jasmine," I said, gesturing to the kids, "I have 20 engineers to train. I have a lot of work to do. And as for dying, I plan to live a very long time because I have to make sure this legacy survives you." I turned my back on her, a gesture that signaled the end of our conversation and the end of her hold on me. "Marcus," I said, turning to the boy, "take the group inside. The garage is open. Go check out the tool chests. Every tool in there is yours now. Treat them with respect and they will build you a life." The kids cheered. Breaking the tension, they ran past Jasmine, dodging her like she was a statue, rushing toward the house with laughter and excitement. Marcus stopped for a second, looking at Jasmine, then at me. He nodded once. A silent understanding between men. Then he ran to join his friends. Jasmine stood there alone on the lawn, the sound of joy filling the air around her, but none of it belonging to her. She looked at the house one last time, seeing the children streaming through the front door, reclaiming the space she thought was hers. She looked at Mrs. Patel, who just raised an eyebrow, challenging her to make a move. Jasmine let out a scream of frustration, a sound of pure, impotent rage. Then she turned and ran. She ran down the driveway, past the black town car, past the yellow bus, and onto the street. She ran in her stained designer clothes and her broken heels, running away from the truth, running toward a future where she would finally have to work. I watched her go, feeling a weight lift off my heart. It was a tragedy, yes, but it was a necessary one. Sometimes you have to prune the branch to save the tree. I walked up the steps of the porch, my hand trailing along the railing. I felt the vibration of 20 pairs of feet running on the floorboards inside the house was alive again. It was breathing. I walked into the foyer where the light was streaming in through the windows, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I heard the sound of a tool chest being opened in the garage, the metallic clink of a wrench hitting concrete. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and possibilities. Mrs. Patel walked up beside me, watching the kids explore. "You did a good thing, Morgan," she said softly. "Coretta would be proud." I looked at the spot on the wall where Coretta's picture used to hang. I didn't need the picture anymore. I could feel her presence in the laughter of the children. I could feel her approval in the warmth of the sun. "Yes," I said, watching a little girl pick up a book from the shelf and hug it to her chest. She would be very proud. I walked into the living room, clapping my hands to get their attention. "All right, everyone, listen up," I called out, my voice strong and clear. "My name is Mr. Mitchell, and today we are going to learn how to build an engine who wants to go first." Every hand in the room shot up. I looked at the sea of raised hands, at the eager faces, and I knew that for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The money was gone, the luxury was gone. But looking at the future, standing in my living room, I knew I was the richest man in the world. The air in the garage used to be heavy with silence, a mausoleum where I stored my memories and polished cars that I rarely drove, but for the last 6 months that silence has been replaced by the hum of servo motors, the crackle of soldering irons, and the chaotic beautiful noise of 20 children arguing about physics. It is a Tuesday afternoon and the workshop is fully alive. Marcus is standing at the main workbench, his brow furrowed in concentration as he adjusts the tension on a robotic arm we have been building for the state science fair. "Easy, Marcus," I say, leaning over his shoulder. "If you tighten that bolt too much, you will strip the thread and the arm will seize up. Treat it like a handshake, firm but not crushing." Marcus nods, biting his lip, and gives the wrench a quarter turn. He hits the power switch and the robotic arm whirs to life, extending smoothly to pick up a delicate glass beaker without cracking it. "I did it," Marcus shouts, his face lighting up with a smile that could power the entire city. "I did it. Mr. Mitchell, look at the grip." I clap him on the shoulder, feeling a swell of pride that is entirely different from the pride I felt when I deposited a royalty check. Money is cold, but this is warm. This is a legacy that breathes. I look around the room at the other students. Some are coding on the laptops. Others are sketching blueprints on the whiteboard for the first time in years. I do not feel like an old man waiting to die. I feel like a gardener watching his forest grow. Across town, in a reality that feels 1,000,000 miles away, the air does not smell of solder and potential. It smells of floor wax and stale vegetables. Jasmine stands behind register 4 at the Budget Mart, wearing a green polyester vest that is 2 sizes too big for her. The fluorescent lights above her head hum with a headache-inducing frequency, casting a harsh glare on her face, which is no longer contoured with expensive makeup, but bare and tired. Price check on the frozen peas. A customer yells a woman with curlers in her hair who is tapping her foot impatiently. "I am trying," Jasmine mumbles, her fingers fumbling with the scanner. The code is wrinkled. "Well, try harder," the woman snaps. "I have ice cream melting here, and I don't have all day. Unlike some people, I actually have a job to get to." Jasmine does not snap back. She does not throw the peas. She does not scream about who her father is. She just swallows the insult, tasting the bitter bile of humility. She types in the code manually, her hands shaking slightly. She used to spend $500 on a lunch without blinking. Now she is being berated over a 99-cent bag of peas. She finishes the transaction and hands the woman the receipt. "Have a nice day." She says the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. Next, the manager shouts from the customer service desk, "Jasmine, pick up the pace." The line is backing up. Jasmine sighs and reaches for the next item on the belt, but as she looks up, her eyes catch the television screen mounted above the express lane. Usually it plays advertisements for detergent or soda, but today it is playing the local news channel. "Breaking news," the anchor says, smiling professionally. "The Morgan and Coretta Engineering Initiative has just received a state grant for its innovative approach to STEM education. Let us go, live to the founder." Morgan Mitchell. Jasmine freezes a carton of milk, hovering in her hand on the screen. She sees me. I am standing in front of the house. Her house, wearing a lab coat surrounded by the students. Marcus is standing next to me holding a trophy. "We are not just building robots here," I say to the reporter, looking calm and dignified. "We are building character. We are proving that genius is distributed equally, even if opportunity is not." The camera pans to the house, showing the fresh coat of paint, the new sign over the garage, and the vibrant energy of the place. Jasmine watches, her mouth slightly open, seeing the life she threw away. She sees the happiness on my face, a happiness she never gave me. She sees the respect in the eyes of the children, a respect she never earned. "Hey lady, are you going to scan the milk or just stare at the TV?" The customer in front of her asks, banging his fist on the counter. Jasmine blinks, snapping back to her gray reality. She looks at the screen one last time, seeing me put my arm around Marcus, seeing the father figure she rejected, embracing the son he chose. "I am scanning it," she whispers, checking the milk quietly, the beeping of the register sounding like a countdown to a life of mediocrity. Just then, her phone vibrates in the pocket of her vest. She is not supposed to have her phone on the floor, but she pulls it out anyway, seeing the screen light up with a number she knows by heart. The caller ID says Fulton County Correctional Facility. She stares at the phone, her thumb hovering over the answer button. She knows what he wants. It is Blake calling for the third time this week. He will beg, he will cry, he will promise that he has changed. He will ask her to put $50 on his commissary account so he can buy ramen noodles and soap. He is a parasite looking for a host even from behind bars. Jasmine looks at the customer waiting for his milk. She looks at the manager glaring at her from the desk, and then she looks at the phone. She remembers the night he tied her up. She remembers the way he looked at her kidneys like they were spare parts. She remembers the silence of the house after he left. She does not feel love. She does not even feel hate. She just feels tired. She presses the red button, declining the call. Then she opens the settings menu and taps block number. The phone goes dark. She slides it back into her pocket and picks up the carton of milk. "That will be $3.50, she says to the customer, her voice flat and final. Back in the garage, the sun is starting to set, casting long golden shadows across the driveway. The parents are arriving to pick up their children, horns honking, waves exchanged. Marcus is the last to leave. He packs his notebook into his backpack and walks to the door. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Mitchell," he says, turning back. "See you tomorrow, Marcus," I say. "Don't forget to finish that schematic for the claw mechanism." "I won't," he promises, and then he runs down the driveway. To his mother's waiting car, I stand in the doorway watching him go. The house is quiet again, but it is a good quiet, a restful quiet. I walk back inside and pick up the picture of Coretta that sits on my workbench right next to the 3D printer. "We did it, Coretta," I whisper to the photo, wiping a smudge of grease off the frame. We finally filled the house. I walk out onto the porch and sit in the rocking chair, the same chair I sat in the night. I decided to run away to Paris 6 months ago. I was a man with a fortune and no future. Now I am a man with a mission and empty pockets, and I have never been richer. I look at the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall for the first time, inviting you into the serenity of this moment. They say that blood is thicker than water. I say, my voice gravelly and deep, resonating with the truth of my journey. But I have learned that blood is just biology. Respect is the true bond that holds people together. I lost one daughter to greed, a girl who shared my DNA, but none of my values. But in her place I have gained 20 sons and daughters who share my passion and my heart. I lean back in the chair, rocking slowly, the rhythm syncing with the crickets in the garden. You cannot save everyone. Sometimes you have to let people fall so they can learn how to stand up. I saved myself, and in doing so, I saved a legacy that will outlive us all. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of the rocking chair and the wind in the trees. If you enjoyed this story and believe that family is defined by love, not lineage, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments. If you would have given Jasmine a second chance, or if you think I made the right call, I read every single comment. Stay strong, stay wise, and remember, the best revenge is not destroying your enemies. It is living a life so beautiful that they cannot even stand to look at it. See you in the next story. I used to believe that a father's job was to build a cushion for his children to land on. I was wrong. A father's job is to build a spine so they can stand tall by cutting Jasmine off. I did not abandon her. I gave her the only gift that matters, the opportunity to find her own worth. Family is not a permanent title granted by biology. It is a daily practice of mutual respect. If you have to buy their love or silence their cruelty with a check, they are not your family. They are your captors. Choose freedom and build a legacy based on character, not currency. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that dignity is worth more than $1, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Now I want to hear from you. Was I too harsh on Jasmine, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, build something that lasts.